Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Eren Was Ghidorah? Ekamikami64 wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. The day after the battle was a morbid and solemn affair. Despite their victory and the casualties being better than they could have been, there was little to celebrate. They were too busy cleaning up the town of dead bodies and marking down what dead they could identify. Regardless of their state, all of the bodies were being gathered for funeral pyres. And all the while, their golden savior slept soundly. Few expected him to awake suddenly anymore. The night had been filled with cannon fire, as they killed the remaining titans pawing uselessly at the wall. Not once had the scaled creature done more than shift in his sleep, and by order of Commander Pixis, no one was to attempt to approach the creature. It wasn't dead, so they knew it would awaken in its own good time. That order was easier to obey than the other. Pixis knew it was impossible to keep the incident with the Titan shifter quiet. There were too many that had been there and seen it. Keeping a gag order with that many was almost impossible. He still made the order, if only for the sake of saying he tried. This complicates things, Pixis noted obviously, taking a swig of his drink as he stood on the wall alone, save one. I should assume you mean the shifter and not the beast? Erwin asked knowingly. Clever as always, Pixis answered in amusement. For once, the morale of the soldiers was on the up. We had retaken the wall and had a creature that appears to be our ally. But the rumors of a soldier that can turn into a titan? He paused to shake his head. With no explanation, everyone is growing wary and paranoid again. Not without good cause, Erwin said with a nod of understanding. Pixis gave him a look and both had the same suspicion. There were more titan shifters. The armored and the colossal could be within the army posing as soldiers. That was alarming. We will have to try and offer an explanation. Has the prisoner said anything? Not a peep. She's just sat in her cell since yesterday, Pixis answered with a hum as he looked over Trost. There is also the matter of our friend down there. Erwin followed his gaze towards the golden pile of scales sleeping down below. The scout commander was still uncertain what to make of this creature, having not seen it awake himself. You believe the central government may attempt to have it executed? While concerning, I'm more concerned about what to do if they don't, Pixis answered, scratching his bald head. Even if we find a place to keep the bastard, how do we get him out of from here? Erwin frowned as he acknowledged that logistical issue. The only way to get the creature through any of the gates would involve this creature breaking through them enough to make room for itself, compromising the walls. Not truly an option. The only straightforward idea Erwin had meant abandoning Trost, letting the beast use it as a den of sort, moving the boulder aside when it ventured out. A small sacrifice for such a useful ally and tool. You said the creature is intelligent to the point of understanding speech. Perhaps it will have an idea of its own, Erwin remarked with a troubled look. Still, if that is the case, that just leaves one very important question. Where did it learn our language? Pixis summarized in agreement. That was a conundrum. Did someone actually teach this creature everything it would need to understand humans? Meanwhile, Hang hadn't known what to expect when she eagerly scaled the walls surrounding Trost, looking for something that was big enough to be a titan, but didn't look like one. But once she laid eyes on the creature, she had only one word for it. Beautiful. And it was even more so seeing it up close and in the sun. Every inch of it was plated with scales that shimmered like gold against the light. Horns that gave a regal disposition like crowns. Tails, 2 of them. Long with a club of spikes at the end of each. Yet even that looked as ornate as it was functional. Even the claws at the bottom of its feet were like swords. And, of course, there were the heads. 3 of them, each with necks longer than some titans. Truly he was a beauty to behold. So, Hang took it upon herself to document this apparent ally of humanity, this dragon, as some might call it. She sat on the roof of a building, overlooking the area the 3-headed entity slept in. One leg was crossed over the other as she sketched a detailed image of the slumbering creature, glancing up to double-check her work. Along the edges of the parchment, she scribbled notes. Mainly the size estimation she was making. They weren't that accurate, but they'd do until she saw the creature standing and walking in all its glory. Still, there was something odd about the creature to her. 3 heads, 2 legs, 2 tails, and yet no arms. It looked incomplete with just the barrel of the body. But that would imply the creature was malformed or, disturbingly, not yet an adult. It was already taller than every known titan besides the colossal, so the idea that it could still grow taller was both amazing and alarming. Wow, that's really good. Huh. Hang snapped her attention to the right and found a young soldier standing there. Who are you? SS Sorry, Cadet Sasha Blouse, she answered sheepishly. I'm part of the team that's supposed to guard Trips. Trips? Hang questioned with a head tilt. For the three heads? Well, yeah, we had to call him something. And he can't speak even if he can understand me? Sasha squealed as Hang was suddenly upon her, grabbing Sasha by the shoulders. You mean you witnessed this creature displaying the ability to understand speech? Hang asked with a manic smile. Both of them froze at the slightest shifting of the great creature's tail. Ma'am, please don't wake Trips up. I don't want to annoy him after he saved me, Sasha requested with a whisper. He saved you. This was the wrong thing to say, Hank's smile becoming very alarming. Intentionally? Yeah. Sasha answered awkwardly. You're with the scouts, right? Yes, I am. Section Commander Hang Zoe, Hang introduced, turning her gaze back to the creature. Don't worry, I wouldn't dare disturbing his beauty sleep. That's great. I'll just be going then, Sasha said, slowly backing away from the woman. I think I'll be seeing more of that girl, Hang said with a grin before sitting down and returning to her drawings. Meanwhile. So, you're serious, Levi stated coolly as he walked down a set of stairs that went underground. The brat down here turned into a titan? I saw it with my own eyes, sir, Rico answered tensely. We found her pulling herself out of the nape of the titan afterwards. There's no doubt that she's the one. And our superior wants me nearby in case she tries anything. Babysitting, in other words, Levi summarized. I don't suppose there's anything else you can tell me? Rico paused in consideration before shaking her head. No, just that when she transformed there was a small explosion around her. Well, that's good to know, Levi muttered, eyeing a cell down the hall, the only one with guards right now. What she said? Not a word, Rico answered simply. She refuses to answer anything we asked. Perhaps you need better questions, Levi said as they arrived at the cell, peering at the girl inside. She was sitting on a bed, chained to a wall, and staring up at the ceiling with a blank expression. Rico, the guards, and Emer all jumped in alarm as Levi slammed the sole of his boot against the bars of the cell, a loud bang echoing through the underground. What the hell? Emer exclaimed, clutching her chest for a moment. See, she can speak, Levi stated neutrally. I just wanted to get a good look at you, brat. Piss off, half-pint, Emer spat back. Who the hell are you supposed to be? Levi, he answered bluntly. Emer froze at that. Everyone in the walls knew that name. Love or hate the scouts, the best of humanity was well known. So, they sent the biggest short stick they had to guard me? I'm honored, Emer said with her arms crossed, trying to hide her nervousness at his stare. Well, our golden friend is on nap duty, so someone had to pick up the slack, Levi mused, leaning against the wall. Look, I don't know shit about that thing, Emer said firmly. Really? Levi questioned with a narrowed gaze. Never seen anything like it in my life, Emer affirmed with a frown. Levi held her gaze for a moment before nodding. I believe you, he said, turning to leave. Emer blinked and suddenly felt very nervous. What did she say? You believe her? Rico asked when they reached the steps. Not really, but if she is telling the truth we have another lead, Levi answered. What do you mean? Rico asked with a frown. The report said that Brat transformed after the scaly bastard actually saved a cadet, but everyone thought she was eaten at first, Levi stated, glancing to Rico. So, if she wasn't after the three-headed thing, she attacked because of the other cadet. Rico stiffened. You think she might be a shifter too? I doubt it. It's not impossible, but it sounds like that one would have transformed too if so, instead of letting themselves get caught by a literal maw of teeth, Levi mused thoughtfully. Either way, this other cadet either knows something, or they might be the leverage we need to get this one to talk. I'd get her for questioning, but she's still unconscious, Rico informed with a frown. That's fine. I don't think any of us are going anywhere for the day. Meanwhile, the situation was dire in the aftermath of their victory. Even with Trost secure, all the bodies of those sacrificed that day had to be found and collected, or whatever remained of them at least. Often, all that was left were severed limbs or a collection of bodies collected in some vile ball after a titan had emptied its full belly. To keep disease and plague from breaking out, it was all hands on deck. Everyone who didn't have a task elsewhere was working around the city to help remove the dead. But even soldiers were given breaks. Time to eat, rest, and give themselves a moment to grieve and collect themselves. Mikasa was doing that final one in earnest. She had an hour to herself. But she did not sleep or rest her eyes for a nap. No, she did the one thing she had been holding back since well before they had retaken Trost. She found a quiet spot to sit down, be alone, and cry. And once she did, it was like the tears would never stop flowing. From one thing to the next, she was able to push herself, focus herself on anything besides the fact that Eren was dead. It hurt so much to think about, to try and accept, that Eren was indeed gone. Eaten by some titan that was now long dead as well. Why had she listened to him? She should have stuck with him and protected him. That was the whole reason she joined the military, to keep Eren from getting killed. And she failed, hopelessly and instantly. She failed Eren, Carla, Grisha. She failed everyone she ever cared about. Even Armin, because now his best friend was gone and it was now down to just the two of them. She had no urge to die, no. She left that behind just before Trips had saved her. But it still hurt so much. She took a moment to take a deep breath. Even if she had no intent to die, she was going to see this through like Eren would have. She'd still join the scouts, and by the walls and everything beyond them, she would see the ocean with Armin if it was the last thing she did. "Mikasa, I've been looking all over for you," Reiner said as he entered the alley Mikasa was sitting in. "Your shift dash." She looked to him. She didn't glare, she didn't have to. Her stoic face, marred by bloodshot eyes, was story enough. Reiner swallowed the words in his mouth before nodding. "I'll keep looking for you then," Reiner said, turning to leave and pretend like he hadn't seen her. Mikasa didn't trust her voice to voice it, but she was thankful for that. She took deep breaths, feeling a pit of rage in her chest. "Was this how you felt, Eren?" she asked herself, thinking back to that day when they lost everything and Eren vowed to kill all the Titans. If this was how he felt, she at least understood him a bit better in the end. Meanwhile, teeth, too many teeth. Krista lurched up in a cold sweat, halfway jumping to her feet as she looked around frantically. She was on a table covered by a blanket? And why was she not in uniform? Who had changed her? "So you're awake." She turned her gaze to meet a familiar head of blonde hair. "Armin." Krista greeted in surprise. "What's going on? Weren't we, in Trost, fighting Titans?" she asked numbly, wondering if it had all been a horrible dream. Armin smiled apologetically. "We were, Krista. That was yesterday." "Take a look around," Armin said, motioning to the room around them. Krista did so, realizing she was in some kind of mess hall, but there were people laying on the tables just like her. "What is this?" "They're using this as a makeshift medical area, for the least critically injured," Armin explained softly. "Everyone with life-threatening injuries got priority." "But what happened? I remember the boulder and then?" Krista's eyes went wide again. "Oh walls, was I eaten by that thing?" "Not really," Armin answered awkwardly. "It's more like he saved you by catching you." "Really?" Krista asked in surprise. "But then why did I pass out?" "We're not sure, but you probably couldn't breathe properly inside the mouth," Armin answered with a shrug. "You passed out. That was yesterday." "Yesterday?" Krista repeated in shock. Did everyone else make?" She stopped as she realized what she said, seeing the grimace Armin tried to cover. "Oh, Armin, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean dash." No, it's fine." "I know what you meant," Armin assured quietly, holding himself together. "As far as we know, no one else died after that," he answered, being technically truthful. "Thank goodness," Krista said in relief before looking awkward. "Not that I'm not happy to see you, but—" "Oh, we decided someone should be here when you woke up, so we tried to have someone here when we're not busy with the cleanup," Armin said with a frown. Krista frowned at the implications. She could only imagine what it had to be like, scavenging for the bodies of those that fell to the Titans, whatever remained of them at least. Training never truly prepared them for that part of being in the military, but she doubted there was anything that truly could ready them short of actually experiencing it. "I'll report in to start helping," Krista immediately volunteered as she made to slide off the table, wobbling on her feet as she grasped her head with a groan. "Careful," Armin said, hands halfway outstretched to grab her if she fell. "Are you sure nothing's hurt or feels broken?" "Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a weird dream is all," Krista answered idly. "Dream?" Armin repeated curiously. "Yeah, it felt like it kept going on forever. I can't remember much though, just that I was a little kid again playing with my sister," Krista answered with a distant look in her eyes. "Oh, I didn't know you had a sibling," Armin commented curiously. "That's the weird part, I don't have a sister. Guess I just dreamed of having one," Krista said with an awkward smile. Armin opened his mouth, but paused suddenly with a startled look on his face. "Armin, what's WR dash?" Krista started, only to stop. She felt it as well. The ground rumbling beneath them. It was soft, but it was there, the walls shuddering. Meanwhile, Hang let out a shuddering breath of awe as the great golden mass began to stir with reptilian groans. She watched on as it rose to its feet, necks craning and flexing as vibrant green eyes revealed themselves to peer at the world once more. She immediately began to rapidly write sketches and notes now that she could see the creature in its full glory. The middle head had 2 frills along the back of its neck while the other 2 only had 1, the way it stood with the tails used to counterbalance the heads. The large shadow that was blocking her light. Hang froze, feeling the hot breath washing over her body. She slowly looked up and beheld those emerald eyes piercing her from atop a large snout. Distinctly intelligent eyes no less, in her opinion at least. Slowly, deliberately, she rose from her seat, keeping her hands where they could be seen. To both sides of her, she could see the other 2 heads watching her as well. Curiously, she noticed that not only was this creature capable of facial expressions, but unless she was misreading the heads, each one was giving her very different looks. The one to her right appeared actively curious, while the one on her left was more on guard and weary. The middle was the hardest to read. Thoughtful would be her guess. She could be wrong, but there was a way to test that theory. "Hello, handsome," Hang said with a smile. She was rewarded with all the heads pulling back in surprise. She flushed, practically drooling as she realized this creature truly understood her. She quickly regathered herself, watching each head's surprise melt into a different reaction. The middle head tilted his head at her, while the suspicious one still looked taken back, and the curious one might just be amused with her now. So, 3 different creatures in one body? Or were they just 3 parts of the same mind? She was brought out of her musing as she realized the one to her right moving around to her backside, looking at her intently. She blinked as she looked down and realized what he was looking towards: her sketches. "Oh, do you want to see my handiwork?" Hang offered with a grin, turning to the front to show her sketch to the middle head, the other 2 moving closer to get a better look. They leaned forward, just short of butting heads as they tried to take in the drawing. "I hope you don't mind, but I couldn't help drawing you while you slept," Hang called up cheerily. 1, 2, and Dre all regarded the strange woman and her sketch with interest. Of course they already knew what they looked like. A perk of having 3 heads with long necks. Still, it was interesting seeing themselves from the outside. Even if it was a bit hard to make out, the sketch being so small compared to themselves. "Looks like nap time's over." Speaking of small, another human swooped in on Odium gear and landed near the woman, having a perpetually severe look on his face. Heinz stared at him intently, feeling a bit on edge. "Levi, you're just in time to say good morning to our new friend," she greeted with a smile. "Levi? Why is that familiar?" "Captain Levi. The strongest human. The strongest scout." "I'm not sure he likes me," Levi stated, eyes shifting between each of the heads keenly, but especially the creature's right head, which seemed to be eyeing him. "I think that one is just grumpy," Hang retorted, waving her hand dismissively. Levi rose an eyebrow as he saw the left head nodding in agreement. Zvi perked up suddenly, head looking every which way for a moment before backing away from the roof, the other 2 heads scanning the area as well. "What spooked him?" Hang asked in surprise. "If I had to guess, I think he realized he's being watched," Levi remarked, watching as the beast's heads looked toward the top of the wall. More precisely, the soldiers atop the wall, manning cannons aimed in his direction. "He even knows what cannons are?" Hang murmured in interest. "What are they doing? Are they going to attack?" "They're just scared we'll attack first. So we do nothing. They're not the enemy? We can probably dodge them anyway." "I apologize for them." The trio of heads glanced back toward the roof, and found a 3rd human standing there now. A blond man with very big eyebrows, his stare intense. Erwin/Commander, Levi and Hang greeted as he walked between them. "But some are still worried by your presence here," Erwin called out as the reptile turned to face them fully. Erwin was no fool though, he knew this being was keenly aware of the weapons still being pointed at him. "Despite that, I would like to offer thanks on behalf of humanity. Without you, Trost would have been lost." Heinz, Zvi, and Dre regarded him curiously, almost feeling awkward as they settled for a nod of acknowledgement. Even if they could speak, what do they even say to that? "Tell me, do you have a plan to get out of here?" Erwin asked simply, getting a negative headshake. "I see. That was a very brave thing to do, trapping yourself in here." Heinz narrowed his eyes. When people said brave, sometimes they meant foolish. Was this a compliment or an insult? Dre glared at him, wanting him to just accept the words at face value. The trio of humans noticed the exchange with interest, and Erwin could tell by the stare that the middle head knew they noticed it as well. "Would you have any interest in helping us further against the Titans?" Erwin questioned firmly. All 3 heads nodded, their teeth showing their bloodlust for the Titans, Heinz's especially. Hang felt a chill down her spine as she saw what was clearly hatred in those eyes. Then we have common cause against a common enemy, Erwin stated, as if some great agreement had been made. I was asked to deliver a message as well, one I hope you understand. The soldiers are clearing the dead from the city, so try to be careful where you walk. The trio of heads nodded in a calmer manner, and Hang and Levi shared a look with one another, realizing that weren't imagining it. This creature's left head had a look of sorrow and sadness for the dead. Thank you again, Erwin said as he turned to leave, walking to the other side of the roof, Hang and Levi falling in after him. See you soon, you beautiful beast. Hang called over her shoulder. But none of the heads acknowledged her this time. Instead, their eyes were keenly fixated on their backs, on their cloaks, on the symbol they wore. The wings of freedom. End of chapter. The return of the anime rejuvenated my drive for all things AOD. Anyway, yes, this is largely a cooldown chapter but setting up various things for later. And Hang absolutely gushing over Erendera, who had no idea how to react to that. Not much else to say. Emer's in prison, Mikasa is grieving, Krista is awake, and everyone is trying to figure out what to do with the massive titan-killing creature. Until next time, have fun. We haven't changed back. They slowly wandered through the streets of Trost, their steps slow and deliberate as their gazes looked all about. Sometimes they crossed paths with a human, but most moved inside buildings before he came near. Some even waved to him. Maybe we can't. Ainz sniffed the air as they paused, turning their gaze to the window of the second floor of a house. Dre let out a low roar while glancing behind. This had become a routine somehow, some soldier venturing out and ascending to the building in question. The female soldier was a little stiff from his presence, landing on the roof just below the window. She opened the window and peered inside before sighing loudly. Damn bastard killed himself, she remarked before turning back to the three heads. Thanks, she said awkwardly. Ainz grunted, Zwei nodded, and Dre made a short chirp of a roar. His way of saying you're welcome. With that, they moved on, making sure not to venture down any roads with too much traffic. Maybe it's better this way? Ainz seemed thoughtful at that, but Dre glared at the middle head, a small snarl on his maw. You want to abandon Mikasa and Armin? Everyone else? Their memories were mostly back now. Mostly. Their name was still fuzzy, but they remembered everything else. Their mother, the years living on their own, training, all the enjoyable annoyances of his fellow soldiers in training, and his failure of a first battle. We can protect them like this. We ripped Titans apart yesterday. Ainz certainly saw the appeal points of Zwei's logic. As a human, they died without making any difference. As this thing, they turned the entire tide almost on their own. They saved their friends. And Armin, as usual, had a plan or two to help save the day. And it was nice being able to fight with Mikasa instead of her doing all the work. Sure, they were trapped in here for the moment, but there were a few ideas in Zwei's head if the humans couldn't figure anything out. Still, Dre was unmoved, glaring at the other two defiantly. Titans aren't the only monsters. Ainz looked away, pretending to be looking for another dead body while Zwei contemplated that point. They could destroy any regular Titan, but what could they do if a human became an enemy of their friends and comrades? They couldn't get into Wall Rose without breaking the gate, and he doubted the humans would let them. And all they could really do was kill and terrify people, probably making a situation worse. Trips. Hey Trips. They were pulled out of their mental debate by a familiar voice, turning to see Connie of all people zipping towards them with ODM gear. Zipping a bit too fast as Ainz and Zwei craned their heads down and up respectively to avoid the human impacting with them. Dre, however, didn't move, resulting in Connie slamming into his snout. Oh, that hurt, Connie groaned, climbing on top of the snout, Dre crossing his eyes to stare at the amusing boy's antics. Okay, not the best way to say hello, Connie said apologetically as he sat up, looking to the highly unamused heads of Ainz and Zwei. Sorry. I'm on watch duty. As in watching you, Connie explained. Now all three were unamused. Hey, don't give me that look, it wasn't my idea, Connie said defensively before sighing as he stood, carefully given he was on Dre's snout still. Look, I just wanted to say hi, and that you were really awesome yesterday, Connie said with a grin, giving them a thumbs up. Dre looked rather proud of that, while Ainz was more smug than anything. Zwei accepted the praise patiently. And well, I heard you were finding bodies, Connie said awkwardly. It's kind of morbid, but I'm hoping I can find something of some friends of mine, Connie said with a shudder. A lot of them got eaten before you showed up. Not that that's your fault, obviously, Connie said correctly, his voice raising as he nearly lost his balance but caught himself. He pointedly pretended like nothing happened, and the trio of heads were willing to ignore it. Just really stinks. There was this one guy, he always went on about killing titans. He'd have liked you, Connie said wistfully. Just hard to believe that suicidal bastard of ours is actually dead. Connie didn't notice the minute widening of the eyes, or the tensing of muscles beneath his feet. Sorry for unloading on you. Guess I just need to say that, Connie said as he zipped line off to a nearby building. I'll be nearby for a couple hours. They didn't respond, didn't even watch him go. We need to find a way to turn back. Zwei looked to Heinz and his abrupt change of opinion with a confused look, while Dre looked pleased with this development. Why? They think we're dead. And? Armin and Mikasa think we're dead. I don't, oh. They think we already left them behind. They need to at least know we're here. Heinz's thoughts were more angry than concerned. Angry at himself, all three of himself for not realizing this problem. He could only imagine what Mikasa and Armin were going through. Agreed. But if we change back, we might not be able to do this again. Then we'll find a way to do it again? That is a fair point. Dre was annoyed with Heinz being the one on the fence. There's more than one way to communicate. Dre was unmoved and Heinz was still troubled. They paused in their wandering again, realizing where their travels had brought them. The building they had helped Mikasa and the others get to, and slaughtered a lot of titans around it. Despite their literal internal argument, they found this place pleasant. This place had an open area they could walk around more freely, and there shouldn't be any dead bodies around here. There shouldn't be, that is. What are you up to, Trips? Connie asked to himself as he watched the dragon's aimless wandering shift as it moved intently towards the building. A low rumble of displeasure emanated from their throats. There was a familiar scent in the air, but not one they could place easily. Probably because they hadn't paid much attention to how people smelled as a human for obvious reasons. Still, it riled them, knowing they might lay their gaze on the corpse of a friend at any moment. Heinz's eyes narrowed as they circled around the building and found a hole in the side, where some titans had tore into it before they arrived to slaughter the mindless creatures. All three heads craned up to peer inside it, not sure what to expect. A broke corpse, crushed by the wall being smashed in? The partially eaten remains of a titan meal? Another suicide? All three stopped short as they caught sight of their quarry. It was a man, a soldier, limply seated in a chair. His right leg was missing, bitten off, and he had clearly bled out. Oh man, Connie said solemnly, having arrived through the hole to see the same sight. Captain Warman? What the hell was he doing over here? That's the one that asked us to help first. Damn. A titan must have taken a bite of him and he managed to get here. Where is his ODM gear? Heinz and Dre scowled as they realized Zwei was right. Maybe it was damaged? Maybe he tried to stop the bleeding with the straps. Maybe. The distinctive sound of ODM gear drew their attention away from the corpse as a very familiar female soldier appeared and landed on the wall next to them, watching him pointedly. Everything okay in there? Annie? What the hell are you doing here? Connie called out. Hello to you too, Annie drawled. Your friend here has been finding random corpses. They sent me over to see if they missed one over here. Yeah. A damn captain too, Connie answered with a sigh. Oh. Annie asked, still watching the beast in front of her. Heinz, Zwei, and Dre stared at Annie idly as the conversation continued. She wasn't this worried about us when she helped us fight off that shifter. And no, she wasn't. Probably just a long day. When they considered the amount of bodies Annie might have helped clean up today, that made sense. Yeah, that's probably it. You need me to help with move his body? Connie asked awkwardly. Collecting bodies was one thing, but talking about it made it more so. No, Reiner and Berthold will help me, Annie replied neutrally. If you say so, Connie answered idly, coming back to the hole and looking towards Trips. So what, you going to lay down for another nap? Nap no. Sitting down for a moment? Annie tensed as she watched and felt the reptilian giant tilt back and fall onto its rear as gently as possible with its legs sliding forward. I don't think this body is built for sitting. It's not too bad. At least we don't have to worry about sitting on our balls. Dre and Zwei gave Heinz strange looks. It was true technically, but still. Guess the big man is taking a break, Connie mused. I'll be on the roof if you guys need help. Right, Annie said with a frown as she leapt off the building to return to her comrades. But she couldn't fight off the growing suspicion in her mind. The way it stared at me and it chose to stay. Does it know what we are? Can it sense us? Smell us? Heinz's maw formed a snarl of distaste. I swear I still feel titans nearby. Maybe it takes some time to fade after they die. Maybe it's just because they're keeping the shifter nearby? Depends on where they're keeping her. Would they leave her on this side of the wall with how fast she is? Perhaps if they want to leave her on the same side of the wall as us. Who was that anyway? The three grew silent in mind. They had avoided musing on that topic so far. Emer? Are you sure? The shifter attacked us after we saved Krista. And Krista was the only one Emer cared about. Most of the other boys were in love with her too. Like Emer was? Definitely not. That conclusion reached led to the other implications. If someone he trained beside for years was a Titan shifter, then any of the others could be too. And as much as Heinz and Dre hated it, Zwei knew it made sense. They could have slipped in easy with the chaos after the walls fell. There's just one problem. There are a lot of problems with this. Not what we meant. If the armor and colossal titans are about the same age as Emer, they'd be children 5 years ago, same as us. Heinz stopped at that while concern went through Dre. Maybe they can just change how old they look? That's not too crazy. Not as crazy as finding out shifters exist at all, no. But if they can't, these years of hell were unleashed by a couple of children. I don't care. We'll still kill them. Agreed? But something about this reeks. Heinz and Dre conceded that. The more they chipped away at the implications of the situation, of the Titan shifters, the more strange the bigger picture became. It didn't take long before Annie returned with Reiner and Berthold. You guys go ahead, I think I'll say hello real quick, Reiner said with a smile. Wait, Berthold called after, but the blonde male was already changing course. Idiot, Annie muttered to herself, hoping he didn't do anything stupid or more importantly crazy. Well, you're looking better, Scales, Reiner called as he landed down on the ground, a short distance from where the golden figure sat. Reiner? Crazy bastard, landing on my head in the middle of a fight. He's crazier standing there. Our tails might take his head off on accident. The trio of heads regarded their friend with various degrees of fondness. Glad you remember me, Reiner said with a chuckle. Don't know what anyone told you, but we got that biting bitch locked up. They had guessed as much, but it was nice to be kept in the loop. We're not supposed to be talking about her, but I think you can keep a secret, Reiner said with a smirk. Asshole. They snorted their agreement. Reiner laughed a bit at that. A sense of humor too, Reiner said in amusement. Anyway, it's good to see you, Scales. And thanks for the help. I also don't know what the hell you even eat, but given your fangs, I think we should be happy you're not munching on the dead. Reiner zipped off back to the building before the trio could compute that last part. Eat humans, even dead ones? Dre shuddered in disgust while Heinz looked both shocked and offended. But Zwei looked curious. Now that I think about it? No. Hell no. Unless it's a shifter. Maybe? Not what I meant. Zwei glared at the two accusing heads on either side of him. But what do we eat? Titans? You know that doesn't count. Maybe it does? We haven't eaten anything in almost a full day now. We're not hungry either. Point, I suppose? Maybe we just don't need to eat? Wait, don't Titans need sunlight? That was what we were taught, yes? Maybe it's the same for us? That would explain it. We did sleep through the night and most of the morning. They decided to end their inner conversation there, rising to their feet once more, their tails swinging about to get the circulation going properly. They froze as the end of their tail scrapped a building, tearing into the side. Everything all right out there? Berthold yelled, suddenly rushing to the hole to look out. Yeah, it's good. Connie called down from the ceiling. Trips just nipped a building with one of his tails. If that's the first time he's done that, I'm impressed, Annie murmured, helping Reiner carry the body out of the room. The three heads gave a collective grunt before trotting on. They eventually began walking around the streets nearest Wall Rose. There were few bodies here, but there were plenty of craters in the ground from when the cannons had been shooting into the Titans. Titan corpses might vanish, but the damage certainly didn't. Just as before, soldiers reacted to his passing in various ways. But it was more positive here, many outright cheering from the walls as they passed. Dre watched, giving a roar of appreciation, and even saw Commander Pixis giving him a salute. Cannons were also aimed in his general direction wherever he went, though he was amused to see some of the soldiers giving the ones manning the cannons a hard time about it. Do you really want to be the one that shot the Golden Titan Killer? One possibly drunken soldier called with a laugh. Golden Titan Killer? I will take Trips over that. I'll take Scales, thank you. Couldn't we spell out what to call us? They paused in their stride, all three heads glancing at one another curiously before continuing on. It's possible. Not easy, but possible. Be easier if we remembered our damn name. Why is that blanking out on us still? We're a giant lizard with three heads. That is the least surprising part of this. Agra, what is that? Heinz was already snarling a bit while Dre cocked his head, trying to make out the sound. It sounded like groaning, but it was much too loud to be a human. Titans? All at once, their stride became quicker, more intent. They followed the roads in the western corner in the back of Trost. Lo and behold, there they were, two Titans. But they were bound in heavy bindings, and giant nails were impaled through their bodies to keep them pinned and unable to attack anyone. They were also surrounded by soldiers, all with the green cloaks bearing the wings of freedom. Oh shit, there it is, Gunther said in shock, paling as he saw the massive beast coming towards them with many fangs showing. And he doesn't look happy. What do we do? Petra asked, voicing the concern of everyone else here. We were not to engage that thing under any circumstances. It's only here for these two, ELD pointed out, keeping his limbs tense and ready while nodding to the two captured Titans. It's probably just here to finish the cleanup. Yeah, but we need these two alive for Section Commander Four Eyes, Olu said, trying to look cool and aloof. Just don't back down and we should be fine. Acting like the captain will not help here, Petra said pointedly. Oh, you sure? Olu asked, forcing himself to smirk as he walked forward, trying to radiate confidence. Hey you, with the scaly ass. They stopped, glancing down at the rather brazen soldier. I hear you're a bit of the bite first, ask question later type, Olu said, keeping himself from shaking as best he could. But I can't have munching on. The scout trailed off as all three heads craned down, until the middle one's snout was mere meters from himself. A burst of hot, very hot air burst from the nostrils, knocking Olu back on his rear, and making him bite his tongue. Ah fuck. Petra sighed as her comrades shook their heads. Zvi jerked back in surprise, watching the man hold his bleeding mouth. I want to feel bad, but I can't. I don't want to, and I still don't. Should they be worried about him bleeding out? Don't worry, he does that a lot. The three heads craned over to find Hang sitting atop of a nearby roof, smiling brightly at him. Having a nice stroll, gorgeous? And she's back. Section Commander? Gunther called up. It's okay, I'll take it from here, Hang called back in assurance before bringing her full attention back to, in her mind, the greatest discovery of mankind. They were of one mind about Hang. On one hand, it was nice to have someone talking to them without fear or worry, even enjoying talking to him. On the other, she was a bit intense. Mind taking a walk with me, big boy? Hang requested playfully. They felt that, if they were human, they'd be even more off-put by this. But they decided to indulge her, following alongside Hang as she led them away from the corner of Trost. I understand you're eager to kill Titans, Hang started off, taking long strides, while her companion took the slowest steps possible to keep pace with her. Believe me, I get it. I used to be like that too. Used to be? Hang contained a squeal of excitement as she saw the three heads peer at her with obvious curiosity and interest. However, I have to ask you not to attack my new friends back there. They both stopped walking, the three heads giving her their undivided attention, which she returned in kind. Humans are weak, pathetic, fragile creatures, Hang said without hesitation, her tone level and stern. I'm sure something like you can't understand how pitiful we are compared to the Titans, or you obviously. Even without your intellect, I would still stake a guess on you being superior even to the armored or colossal Titans. Dre preened at that while Heinz gained a touch of smugness at the ego stroke. Zvi just stared, waiting for the explanation. But we humans have only our brains. Our only chance to stand against the Titans is to learn more about them, understand them. And to that end, I need them alive to study, Hang explained, staring him intently in the eye. So please, my friend, leave them to my care. Zvi looked amused, nodding his consent on behalf of all three of them. There was no debate, nothing to discuss. If it was to help humans against Titans, then he would suffer those two to live for now. Hang instantly traded in her serious expression for a wide grin as she flushed and was definitely drooling now. Oh, I wish I could know what was going on in those heads of yours. The stories you could tell. She's going to be a bit disappointed if she finds out we were just a cadet before this. I don't think she can be disappointed by us. I almost feel bad for the shifter. Almost. With that, the Titan Slayer turned to retrace his path and put distance between him and the Titans. He had no desire to be near Titans he wasn't going to kill. Thanks for the save, Section Commander, Olu said, a quiver of fear still in his breath as Hang descended to join the Levi squad. Hang took one look at him and had one thing to say. Olu, go change your pants before Levi sees or Titans forbid smells you. The rest of the day went rather uneventfully for the behemoth. Connie switched out for Sasha, Sasha for Annie. After her, the higher-ups apparently decided they didn't need someone watching them all the time. The one thing that troubled all three of his heads was, eventually, who they didn't see. Mikasa and Armin. We've seen everyone else. Even Horseface. Except Krista. Perhaps they're just helping in the areas we've avoided? That was more likely than it seemed at first. There was a good third of Trost they didn't go into, where most of the soldiers were finding and collecting bodies. They stayed out of the way, not wanting to disturb or worsen the already grim task these soldiers were dealing with. Maybe they're working on the other side of the wall? Maybe? Zwei was the brains of the three, but he wasn't sure what else they would be doing on the other side of the wall after beating back the Titans for the first time. He glanced to the western length of Trost's wall, Ainz and Dre doing so as well. The sun will be setting soon. Indeed, it wasn't long before the sun began to fall behind the great structure. And yet, as shadows fell over the city, they did not find themselves growing tired or weary. Not only did that put a dent in their theory about their body being powered by sunlight, it also meant that the night could become incredibly boring. More importantly, so he can see in the dark? Erwin asked idly as he stood on the wall, Hang seated near a torch with her notebook in hand. They both stared down into Trost, the darkness of night broken by the lights of torches and fires. There was just enough light to make out the great shadow moving about the city. Something like that, Hang answered thoughtfully. Perhaps he can see heat or something else. Good. Our friend has been mindful around humans, so we hopefully won't have any accidental deaths to report, Erwin remarked. Indeed, Zwei had initially assumed they just saw better as this creature than as a human, but the later it grew, the more they realized their vision should be growing dark with the lack of light. Instead they could still see. Mostly. Colors had largely faded or dulled away entirely to black and white, but they could see something else. A strange color they didn't know how to describe, one that surrounded the humans, giving them a strange glow of sorts. Why do we only have this now? We might not have noticed in the light. And we were kind of busy yesterday. Still, this was a rather helpful boon for them. At least they weren't likely to step on some unlucky soul in the dark. Their eyes traveled to a large light burning in the city. They were no fool, they knew that was where the bodies were being burned. They had planned to stay away, to let those souls be put to rest in what little peace a mass bonfire could give. But they told themselves it was just to see if the light of the fires affected their vision, but they knew they wanted to go anyway. Even if no one knew who they were, it felt wrong to be absent. After all, his teammates were in that fire too. So, with careful steps, he treaded to the pyres as softly as possible. It didn't take long for them to reach the street, peering down at the fires with soldiers standing about to pay their respects. The glow is fainter around the fire. Shut up. There they are. Zwei and Dre followed Ainz's gaze and saw who he meant, their friends. Sasha, Connie, Jean, Marco, Reiner, Annie, and Armin. What the hell is he doing here? Jean asked, frowning at the shadowed figure of their scaled ally, green eyes glinting in the darkness. Calm down, he probably just wanted to see what the fire was about, Marco assured placatingly. See, it's not like he's coming closer. Give him a break, guys, Sasha said with a sigh. Trips was saving us all day yesterday. He's probably sad too that they died. You think Scales cares about people he's never even met before? Reiner asked with a distant tone to his voice. Guys, can we just shut up about Trips for a moment? Connie said, sitting down with a hand to his head. This is supposed to be about them tonight, he said, looking to the flames solemnly. Yeah, Armin said under his breath, staring aimlessly at the flames. Oh, what they would give at the moment just to be able to speak, to call out to his first friend that he was still here, right here. For all his bluster, Ainz felt closer to tears than Dre. Tears of frustration, but still. They weren't even sure if they could cry in this body. They froze as another figure approached the pyres. You came, Armin greeted with a small, sad smile. Mikasa just nodded mutely, eyes transfixed on the fires, even as everyone stared at her. Everyone. She's been crying. She looks exhausted. Dre let out a low, sorrowful groan that briefly echoed across the streets. The young soldiers looked on in surprise, but didn't react beyond that. It was strange to accept that this great creature was in mourning with them, but it became easier to believe by the minute. Mikasa looked to those eyes, gleaming in the night, their color so much like Eren's that it almost hurt. She pulled the scarf close to her face, savoring everything about it, its warmth, its texture, all of it. "Thank you, Eren, for everything," Mikasa whispered, so softly that no one could hear her over the cackling of the flames. No one save Armin, who looked to her with empathy. "You can rest now. You're free." Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. What is she doing? She's walking to the fire. Why? Mikasa? For a rare time, the three heads were in perfect unison of being for more than a single instance or decision. For there were no thoughts, only a strange numbness as they watched Mikasa stop in front of the fires, completely ignoring the heat and slowly unwrapping her scarf, everyone staring in silent shock. Everyone. She folded it neatly in her hands, reaching it towards the flames, ready to throw it into the fire. Mikasa. All at once, a wind rushed through the streets, the flames nearly going horizontal. And in that instance, the gust had ripped away the scarf into the air before Mikasa could close her hands. Where did that come from? Connie said in surprise. It wasn't from Trip's side of the street. Oh no, I think it might rain, Sasha said with a frown as she looked up. Mikasa ignored them, running to the edge off the light, looking frantically for her scarf. Mikasa, I'll grab a torch. Armin called, looking around for a piece of wood he could use. Here, I got Jean said, having turned to fetch one when the scarf had left Mikasa's hands. He stopped, and all grew silent at the soft shaking of the ground. The figure of the three-headed beast loomed ever closer now, but its eyes were low to the ground. Or as low as they could be. Armin inhaled sharply, and his comrades were left speechless as the heads creeped out of the darkness and brought themselves into the light. And from the middle head, a long tongue stuck out. A tongue that was curled and holding a red scarf rather awkwardly. No way. Marco breathed. Wow. Just wow, Sasha summarized. Wait. Armin said with a shuddering breath, eyes dilating as he looked at the green-eyed beast, holding the scarf while all three heads stared at Mikasa and only Mikasa. It can't be. Mikasa's disbelief melted away into a soft, stoic expression. Thank you, she said quietly, but she was sure she was heard. Carefully she reached out to retake the scarf. Zwei pulled back, barely making her blink. She looked to either side in confusion as Heinz and Dre crooned at her with shrill voices. What the hell is this about? Annie asked, trying to keep the nervousness off her face. Armin? You okay? Jean asked, seeing the boy's shoulders shaking. I don't understand, Mikasa said, feeling at a loss for what was going on. Heinz and Dre looked to Zwei imploringly, who closed his eyes in anger? Frustration? What was that look on the reptile's face, Mikasa wondered. Zwei's eyes opened and inched closer to Mikasa. She was about to reach out again, when the tongue brought the scarf beyond her hand and Mikasa felt lightning crawling up her spine as the tongue began to move the scarf around her. It was slow, sloppy, and a bit wet. The tongue all but through the last end of the scarf on her head. The hell? Jean said under his breath in disbelief. There's no way. It's him. I don't know how, but it's him, Armin said, tears running down his eyes. Mikasa stood there silently, numbly while gazing up at the eyes. Those two familiar, green eyes. Eyes that held such anger, such hate, but something softer and more beautiful as well. Eyes now filled with a longing, sadness, as if begging her to understand what he was trying to say to her. Her voice almost died in her throat, as if saying it aloud might just choke her to utter it. Her eyes welled with renewed tears and one word left her lips. One name. Eren? Heinz, Zwei, and Dre all crooned around her in happiness, relief, remorse, and 1,000 other emotions. We remember now. Our name. My name. Eren? Did she just call him? Marco said quietly. That suicidal bastard, Jean said, gritting his teeth as he held back his own tears. Wait, what? Connie said with a frown. I don't. Mikasa ignored them all as she clutched onto the middle nose, sobbing into the snout. All three heads let out noises. Hearing his name made him feel like he had truly reclaimed his memories and all the emotions that they inspired. And as Mikasa cried into him, Eren had only one thought. I need to change back. End of chapter. There you are, a day in the life of Erendra. I didn't go into this planning on the chapter just showing what life is like for Erendra, but I liked it too much to not do it. Naturally, some people are weary of Eren, but most are appreciative. Hang as always. But instead of Marco, it's fucking Kits that died suspiciously. I hinted this a chapter or two ago, but I don't think anyone picked up on it. And yes, the kaiju is out of the bag. Could I have dragged this out a bit longer? Yeah, but it wouldn't have added anything to the story. So, they know that Trips is actually Eren now. However, while Eren has resolved to get his human form back, how he gets it is still an issue. We'll be exploring that next chapter, among other things. Eren? Connie exclaimed in shock, looking between the gold beast and the others. Trips is Eren? The hell? Be a little louder, I don't think everyone in Sina heard you, Jean muttered numbly, hand over his face. If I hadn't seen YM the Titan Shifter yesterday, I wouldn't believe it, Marco mused under his breath. That's Eren? Reiner whispered with a shuddering breath, a panic swelling in his chest. Annie stepped closer to Reiner with a very, very pale expression as she grabbed his arm sharply, her nails digging into his skin. Reiner winced and almost yelled at her before regaining his composure before anyone noticed. All the while, Mikasa rested against the nose of Eren's middle head, absorbed in his loud yet rhythmic breathing. But the other two heads now looked to the group watching them. Or more exactly, Armin. The blonde approached, his feet moving before he even knew what he was doing. His pace was slow, but from disbelief instead of fear. He had already known the three-headed entity meant them no harm. Knowing it was Eren just confirmed that. Still, it was too surreal, as if this might be a dream he'd awaken from at any moment. But if this was real, it raised so many more questions. Eren's leftmost head leaned down towards Armin as Mikasa retracted from the snout, keeping one hand on it as she turned to face Armin as well. Armin couldn't remember the last time Mikasa smiled like that, so true and overflowing with happiness, even if her eyes were still stained with tears. How? Armin swallowed, looking up at the head nearest him. How is this possible? He asked, slowly reaching out to touch the golden scales. He almost gasped and almost laughed as he saw what might be a smile on this head, as Eren tilted it briefly to indicate its lack of answer. Okay, guys? Sasha spoke up, and the rightmost head gave her an annoyed look that made her flinch. What do we do now? That's a good question, Cadet Blouse. Everyone looked to the rooftops and saw three other scouts standing up there with curious and suspicious looks, one obviously being the leader. Eren just gave the speaker an unamused look with all three heads. He was growing far too used to this one. Hey, it's you. The scout commander with the drawings. Sasha recalled, scrunching her brow. Honget. Hang, she corrected patiently as she descended from the roof before turning to the two standing nearest their giant ally. So, I take it you two know something about this handsome devil, eh? She asked with a grin. Mikasa had a rather dark look about her eyes, her stare boring into Hank's, until Eren's middle head nudged her in the back. She blinked, turning to see the head was giving her a knowing, scolding look. Everyone watched with confusion and amusement in Hank's case, as the right head made a shrill sound that might be a laugh while the left head growled in annoyance at the other. He's actually arguing with himself, Jean said under his breath. Why is that the most believable part of this? Armin looked nervously from the scout to Mikasa and Eren, until he caught the middle head's stare. It was pointed, giving him a slow and deliberate nod. Armin's eyes widened in understanding. Eren wanted him to tell this woman who he was. Steeling himself, he wiped away his tears and turned to Hang with a salute. Ma'am, I have information to report regarding the... Armin paused, realizing that there was no official designation for whatever Eren had become. The absolutely gorgeous specimen behind you, yes, Hang filled in with a smile, waving him on eagerly. Armin was more than a bit bewildered by that description, but decided not to question it as he felt the amused snort of breath from Eren hitting his backside. We believe we now know his identity. Hang grew silent, the flames casting a glare onto her goggles. Is that so? She asked with utmost seriousness. I would ask, but I can assume by the looks on your faces that this was a rather recent discovery, she summarized. Eren's heads eyed her intently. Eins with warning, Zwei with wariness and Dre with concern. You too. Hang called, her gaze snapping back to the scouts on the roof. Report back to the commander, tell him that I need a meeting with himself and Commander Pixis. Ma'am, they saluted before flying off on their gear. Hang waited a moment before turning to the cadets nearby. I assume you all already know as well? Yeah. Why, is this some government secret? Connie asked in confusion. Not yet, but it might be best not to let this spread, Hang said before turning to Armin again. What are your names, cadets? Armin Artlert, ma'am, Armin answered dutifully. Mikasa Ackerman, Mikasa answered simply, still eyeing Hang somewhat. Hang nodded, filing their names to memory. Tell me. Armin took a deep breath. His name is Eren Yeager of the 104th. It was very telling that Hang didn't look at all surprised by that information. So, you are human, Hang said, glancing to Eren with a rather knowing look on her face. Wait, what? Jean spoke up, scowling through his shock. You already knew that? How the hell? It was mostly suspicion, but it was starting to become rather strange, Hang elaborated, never taking her eyes off Eren. Understanding the human language is one thing, but you knew too many concepts to have not been living among humans at some point. Eren didn't deny that. He hadn't exactly been trying to hide who or what he was before. He is in my squad, Armin continued when Hang looked to him again. We thought he was dead, ma'am. Eren's left head let out a low rumble that somehow sounded apologetic. Armin and Mikasa stared in surprise before smiling. I feel like we're intruding on something private, Marco whispered awkwardly. Esakich, Sasha said, watching with rapid attention. Dead, not missing, Hang noted after a brief pause. Armin flinched. I saw him get eaten by a titan, Armin answered, his head bowed in shame. Hang's eyes widened, and it seemed as though she might lunge at the boy and start shooting 1,000 new things she wanted to ask. But she restrained herself, if barely. Clearing her throat, she turned her attention back to Eren. I suppose if you knew how to change back you would have already? Eren's middle head nodded firmly, his left head growling in displeasure. Which is going to make getting anything besides yes or no answers from you a problem, Hang said with a sigh, looking from Mikasa and Armin to the other cadets nearby. It should go without saying that there is a gag order on this information until the higher-ups decide otherwise. Understood. They all took a moment to regather themselves, but the cadets all gave their murmurs of yes, ma'am. Good. Now, as much as I'd like to pull an all-nighter, you should all turn in for the night. There will be more work in the morning even if we don't have questions for all of you, Hang instructed. I'm staying, Mikasa said with a deadly serious tone. Hang sighed, wondering how to approach this. It didn't take a genius to know that Mikasa had been close to the human Eren had been. Listen, I wouldn't mind trying to take a nap on his golden backside either, but now isn't really the time. Did she really just say that? Connie asked, feeling utterly lost now. Jean gave a look to Eren, at least the leftmost head, who caught his look out of the corner of his eye. Jean pointed to Hang with a look of dread and questioning. Eren just nodded as subtly as possibly, indicating that yes, Hang was always like this in his experience. I'm staying, Mikasa repeated, a dark look in her eyes. Everyone grew tense at the little standoff, which caused even Hang to jump in alarm when Eren slammed one of his tails on the ground. Not too hard but enough to spook them. Damn it, Trips. You're going to give me a heart attack at this rate. Connie yelled, clutching his chest. You're still calling him Trips, Annie pointed out, the least startled of the bunch. I don't give a damn right now, Connie retorted in frustration. The trio of friends, plus the scientist, ignored the others as they looked up at the golden beast. Eren? Mikasa asked in confusion. Eren's heads were giving her a rather stern look, with the right being more annoyed and the left being more concerned? Reluctant? Exasperated? Reptilian facial expressions weren't anyone's specialty. The middle head nodded Mikasa in Hank's direction, his meaning fairly obvious now. No, I'm not leaving you again. Mikasa insisted. Mikasa? Armin said softly, knowing this was hard for her. He blinked as the heads looked towards him, growling something before the middle head nodded pointedly to something. Armin followed the direction, until he realized Eren wasn't nodding to Hang, but rather to the pyre behind her. He scrunched his brow, looking to Eren again, who nodded meaningfully to Mikasa and Flames. Oh, Armin said in understanding. It's him? Do you know what he's trying to say? Hang asked with interest. I think he's saying Mikasa should go since the corpses haven't been cleared out of Trost? Armin tried, looking to Eren as he continued. And he's worried she'll get sick sleeping in Trost? The left head nodded, one of their tails coming around to actually point at Armin, who instinctively stepped back at the sudden action, but smiled at realizing he had read his friend correctly. Ah, that's actually kind of sweet, Sasha said with a smile, which turned sheepish under the annoyed look of the right head. Mikasa looked both touched by the sentiment, while wanting to refute the concern. Hang stroked her chin, seeing the girl's continued reluctance. If it makes you feel any better, you'll probably be the main one assigned to watching him after tonight, she offered, which did seem to relieve Mikasa somewhat. Eren's head shared a look. Mikasa with official guard duty over him. Great. On the bright side, she couldn't even try to drag him away now. With great reluctance on Mikasa's part, the young soldiers dispersed, still trying to come to grips with this new revelations. Meanwhile, Bertholdt knew something was wrong the moment he saw Annie enter the room. Reiner was unpredictable, and it was not always easy to tell if he was talking to the soldier or the warrior. But Annie? Her pale face and empty eyes told him that their mission just got a lot harder than it already was. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Reiner sat down with a pensive face. "It's Eren," he said bluntly, vaguely, ominously. Bertholdt blinked. "But Eren died, didn't he? He survived? That's well good, I guess." He tried, not sure why they were spooked yet. "Bertholdt," Annie said coldly. "It is Eren." He furrowed his brow at the emphasis before understanding shook him to his very core, draining the color from his face. "You mean, that thing?" he stammered. At their looks, he buried his face in his hands. Eren was that creature. That wrathful, powerful, titan-killing creature. "Are you sure?" "It wrapped the scarf around Mikasa with its tongue," Annie explained bluntly. "Shit," Bertholdt hissed. "He should have tried taking him out when he had the chance. How is that possible? The Beast Titan is back in Marley. The 9 had to have spread off from the founder. Maybe he's a new 10th shifter," Reiner remarked grimly. "But that raises more questions than answers. Only the cart could last this long, and no Titan heals like that with no steam or anything." Annie sat in silence for a moment. "He's stuck in Trost if he can't change back." "He's not an issue yet," Annie pointed out. "Nobody suspects us for now." "What about Ymir?" Bertholdt asked with a frown. "I mean, would she remember us?" Reiner and Annie flinched, remembering the day Marcel died. It was possible she did. Memories from their time as a pure Titan were strange things, brief as they were. Annie had flashes of eating her predecessor, while Reiner had no memory of it all. How long had Ymir even been a pure Titan? "I'm pretty sure she does, by the look on her face when I saved her from getting eaten," Annie remarked. "Even if she does, I don't think she's said anything yet," Reiner countered. "Either way, we need to find out where they're holding her. But that might give us away. They'd suspect anyone snooping about for her to be other shifters," Bertholdt reasoned cautiously. "Fuck. He's right," Annie said with a sigh. "Even if she doesn't say anything, Ymir screwed us with that reveal. Why wouldn't she say anything though? About anything?" Reiner wondered. "They obviously don't trust her after that stunt." Annie paused. "Ymir might be an idiot, but she's not dumb. She probably figured out that the ones in power don't want the truth to get out. But the ones not in the loop will still try and interrogate her. So, we have some time to figure that out," Reiner mused. "For now, we keep an eye on everything. It'll be hard to keep Ymir completely a secret, but if Eren does turn back, this all gets a lot more complicated. Do you think you two could beat him? Or?" Bertholdt paused meaningfully, wondering if he'd have to use his destructive transformation to deal with such a foe. "Hard to say," Annie said with a scowl. "He seems to be tough as shit, but no arms has to be a handicap. But I have no idea how his teeth do against our hardening." "There is a more important question actually," Reiner said with a scowl. Annie raised an eyebrow. "What are you talking about? What happens if we kill him?" Reiner questioned. Bertholdt looked confused while Annie narrowed her eyes. "What? If he dies, will another devil get that power?" Reiner elaborated. "Or does it die with him? If not, how would we take it from him?" Bertholdt looked down. Reiner had a point. If Eren's powers worked like a Titan's in any way, that might mean that a newborn would get the power. Or, more importantly, that they could steal it by devouring Eren, his true body within that creature. But where would it be, with 3 different necks, all of them so long? "Reiner," Annie said with a sigh. "If there was ever a time to consider jumping ship and just reporting what we know, this would be the time." Reiner had to admit Annie had a point, even more than usual. "However, if we go AWOL now, they'll probably figure out it was us. And we'll have no chance at finding the coordinates." Annie didn't like it, but she conceded that point. "If things start to go south again, we go home," Reiner decided. "But I think we need to take a shot at him before we turn tail and run. Or we might find ourselves replaced very quickly." They all grew silent at that. None of them said it, but they all knew it. None of them wanted to continue this course, but they had few other options and had to tread carefully to keep their secret now. They were in a bind. The next day, Ymir was in a bind. She knew it, and she knew she had to do something about that. The trouble was, she wasn't entirely sure what option would fuck her over the least. Option 1, say nothing to anyone. Probably lead to them torturing her for information and then killing her to try and understand her powers as a Titan shifter. She could try to escape in there, they were bound to fuck up at least once. Hopefully. But even if she did get out of here, where would she even go? It's not like there was any place in the outside world for her. Marley would just have her eaten to get their Titan back, and almost anywhere else would be a death sentence. Option 2, spill her guts to the people of the walls. Honestly, on its face it was the better idea. She tells the truth about this messed up lie they lived under, and she probably wins enough goodwill to not get executed. The only problem? The lie itself. The people of the walls truly believed that they were the last of humanity, that the Titans had conquered everything. They didn't even know that Titans were their own kind, or that the Eldian Empire existed. Even if it had been 100 years ago, it was impossible for knowledge and history of that scale to be completely suppressed and destroyed. Which only meant one thing: Titan fuckery was afoot. She had come from the age just after the Eldian Empire fell, when the memory of it was still ripe for everyone. Tales of the founding Titan, the King's Titan, were still whispered in awe and terror. It made these walls made of colossal Titans. If the legends were true, it had made all Eldians immune to a plague once. What else could it do? Erasing the entire memories of a group of people didn't seem unlikely. So, the King of the Walls wanted the truth to remain hidden, or whoever was really in charge now did. And the founding Titan hadn't done anything to stop the fall of Wall Maria. What could that mean? Emer wasn't sure, but it summed up her problem with telling the truth. Either the founding Titan was still in play and telling the truth would bring its wrath upon her, or it was out of commission somehow. If so, she doubted there was any future for the people behind these walls. If Marley sent 4 of their 7 shifters to this island, they were playing for keeps. And if she told the truth, that would just put her on Marley's shit list even more, if they ever cared to find out the people here didn't know anything. So, say nothing and hope for an opening, or throw her lot in with a doomed cause. What wonderful choices. Speaking of wonderful choices, she was starting to prefer her other guards over Levi. She could at least get a reaction out of them if she wanted. He just kept giving her this stare like he was debating which limb to cut off. All while drinking tea. Who the hell holds a cup like that anyway? Emer asked with a sigh. Levi didn't answer, but she felt him taking another sip was somehow mocking her. Seriously, is that a nobility thing or something? Were you some pampered brat before you became a badass? Emer asked with a smirk. Levi's eyes narrowed, just a bit, and Emer suddenly felt he was adding her tongue to the list of options to cut off from her body. You know, I heard what you said the other day. How's it feel to be the strongest human and stuck on babysitting duty? Emer inquired with a chuckle. Got to admit, that'd suck a bit, but at least it gives you a chance to drink. I'm actually disappointed, Levi said idly. It took you only a day for your boredom to get to you. Hey, I tried counting the bricks in the ceiling, but it lost its appeal after the 11th time, Emer countered sarcastically. Their conversation stopped as footsteps filled the air, prompting Levi to look off to the side. Well, congrats. Things are about to get more interesting for you. Emer scowled. She didn't like the way he said that, and it made her feel all the more tense as the steps grew louder in her ears until, slam. Emer nearly jumped out of her bed as a woman appeared, having slammed her hands against the bars, staring at Emer with an unnerving intensity, before melting into a too friendly smile. And how are we today? The fuck is wrong with you people? Emer yelled, catching her breath. So you're Emer? Hang greeted, completely unbothered. I'm Hang Zoe. I see you've met my gloomy friend. Get on with it, Four Eyes, Levi said calmly. Great. Let me guess you talk too much because he doesn't talk enough. Emer asked sarcastically. Hang just chuckled. Sorry. I've actually been eager to meet you, but our friend up there has kept us preoccupied, she explained apologetically. Emer rolled her eyes. I already told Shorty over there, I don't know anything about the lizard. Is that right? Hang mused, looking to Levi. Didn't she turn into a Titan right after that gorgeous bastard saved another cadet? Gorgeous? Emer asked before blinking as she looked to Levi while pointing to Hang. Is she talking about Dash? The scaly bastard, yeah, Levi confirmed, glancing to the mad science woman. And yes, she did. Maybe she's an accomplice in all this? Hang suggested with a rather dangerous smile. Perhaps she'll be more talkative. Wait, Emer spoke up with a sigh of resignation. You're both assholes, you know that, shrimp freak? More than you know, Levi agreed. Now what do you want to say? I don't know, okay? Emer answered with a sigh. I've never seen that thing before in my life. Perhaps, Hang said with interest. But you have to know a great deal about Titans. You know, seeing as you are one. Emer didn't answer, just stared at the scout with narrowed eyes. Then what's so important about this other cadet? Levi asked pointedly. Don't tell me you went berserk over a crush? Emer clenched her fists before she could stop herself. Oh, so it is that, Levi observed. She has nothing to do with any of this, okay? She didn't know about me, about what I am, Emer swore tiredly. And what are you really? Hang inquired, narrowing her eyes at the shifter. Titan? Human? Emer took a deep breath at that. You probably don't want to know, she warned with a frown. But I won't tell you anything more. Not until I've had a chance to see Krista. Do you think you're in a position to bargain? Levi countered with a raised eyebrow. Yes, Emer countered with a small smirk. We both have something the other wants. You want answers, I want to see Krista, Emer pointed out before something crossed her face. Unless she's alive, Hank confirmed quickly. Though, if you're telling the truth about her, what makes you think she'll even want to see you now? Emer's smirk became hollow. If not, she can tell me so to my face at least. Levi stared at her for a moment. Give us something useful and we'll consider it. Emer remained silent and resolved, as if challenging them to call her bluff. Hank sighed deeply. Look, this is kind of your last chance to cooperate, to give us some reason to believe you're not our enemy. Otherwise, I imagine this conversation will get a lot less civil. Emer smirked, and it wasn't completely fake. She had survived a few rounds of torture before getting shipped off to paradise, then the decades of being a Titan. And she could regenerate. She could take whatever they could throw at her. Bite me. Hang shrugged in disappointment. Okay, come on over, Hang said, waving to someone else in the hall outside of Emer's view. Emer felt all the bark and courage drain from her face as she saw who came into sight. It was a soldier, handcuffed with a bag over their head, while being led roughly by another soldier with white hair. But they were short. Really short. No. No. Emer's mind was in a loop as she prayed she was wrong, that this was a trick. Rico kept a firm grip on her captive and pulled the bag off, revealing Emer's fear. Emer? Krista. Emer yelled, pulling forth and lurching against her chains. My, what a reaction, Hank teased with a chuckle, patting Krista on the shoulder, the cadet wincing at the touch. We've been having some interesting but rather uninformative talks with Ms. Lenz here. Emer gritted her teeth as she stared at Krista. She looked tired, exhausted, but her face was painted with this look that nearly broke Emer's heart. It was confusion and hurt, bordering on betrayal. Emer, I don't understand what's going on. Is it true? Did you turned into a Titan? Krista asked softly. Emer shut her eyes as hard as she could before the fight drained out of her. Yeah, that's true. That was my big secret, Emer said with a hollow smile. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way. Then why did you do it? Krista cried out, Hang leaning away in surprise at the outburst. You had to know that you couldn't take on that monster by yourself. So what was it? Were you expecting help from someone? Emer blinked, her hands trembling as she realized what Krista of all people was asking her, accusing her of. Emer, are you helping the armor and colossal Titans? Are you trying to kill us all? Krista asked, her tone desperate to believe it wasn't true. Krista, do you really, that's not? Emer stopped, the words trapped in her throat. Please, I want to understand. I want to believe you're not our enemy, Krista all but begged, eyes glistening with tears. That you're not my enemy. They both knew that was what Krista meant. Emer couldn't take it. She could live with Krista thinking anything else, except that she wanted to harm her, kill her. No, Krista. I'm not with them. I never was, I swear, Emer answered solemnly. Then who are you with exactly? Hang interrupted with a raised eyebrow. Emer sked and looked away. Oi, brat, get your act together, Levi called out in annoyance. The higher-ups aren't convinced that your friend here knows nothing. So if we don't get answers from you? Emer inhaled sharply. It wasn't too hard to imagine them torturing Krista, uselessly because the small blonde really knew nothing about this. They already had her in chains. Fucking damn you all, Emer hissed with a trembling voice. Emer, please. Everyone is just scared and confused, Krista all but begged. If you just tell them what you know, it doesn't matter. You're all fucked. Emer exclaimed in frustration, Krista taking a step back in shock. There is no future beyond these walls. Even with that scaly bastard up there, that won't be enough. You're all doomed, don't you get it? We've been doomed for 100 years, Hang remarked casually. That hasn't stopped us from trying anyway. If we're doomed, why are you here? Krista asked with a frown. Emer, why did you dash? I thought you were dead, okay? Emer said with an empty tone. I saw red. Wanted to make the overgrown lizard pay for eating you. Didn't really register or care that you would have died if it hadn't done anything. So you were just trying to avenge your friend? Hang said knowingly. Ymir glared a bit at the meaning but didn't refute it. You're lucky nobody else got hurt or killed trying to fight you, Levi remarked. We're not promising shit. Because we can't. But we can at least try and keep you from getting turned into a corpse and taken apart. Ymir sat there for a long moment. The question was becoming more and more akin to asking how she wanted to die. Well, you don't need to decide just yet, Hang said suddenly, nodding to Rico and Krista. The small woman nodded, pulling the cadet away roughly. Where are you taking her? Ymir yelled suddenly, sweat forming on her brow. We're not taking her anywhere, Levi said, peeling up a key as he approached the cell next to Ymir's. We're just going to get Ms. Lenz here situated in her own cell, Hang explained amicably. Ymir's eyes dilated as she heard the chains being attached to Krista, and her situation began to sink in. Transforming in this small area was risky but not impossible since her Titan was so small. But if she did, she'd probably kill Krista as well. And if they did decide to torture Krista for information, they'd do it right there, right next to her. So she could hear every fucking thing. Meanwhile, Krista sat uneasily on the bed while Hang secured the chains to nothing at all. There you go, all set, Hang said, placing a hand on Krista's shoulder and giving her an encouraging nod. Krista nodded and sighed as they moved away, locking her in the cell. After all, they had to make this convincing. Flashback. Krista wasn't too nervous, not at the beginning. When she had attempted to report for duty, she had been escorted to a small room with a table and been told to wait here. That sounded scary to most people, but under the circumstances, it made sense. With the situation as it was, they had to make use of the rooms they could work with in the area. She just assumed they wanted an in-depth report on her encounter with the creature that saved her. She shivered, though not exactly in fear. The memories had started to resurface after she initially woke up. It was so strange and uncomfortable, being in the mouth of another creature, let alone the tongue wrapping around her like a snake. Not to mention the strange jolt that ran through her body. Though she wasn't sure what made her black out. Maybe the jolt was some kind of paralytic or non-lethal venom. Or had she just not been able to breathe properly in that thing's mouth? Regardless, she knew Ymir and the others would never let her live this down. She could hear the jokes about how she tasted already. Speaking of Ymir, she was surprised she hadn't seen her instead of Armin when she awoke. She wondered how much effort it took to force her away from her bedside. She would have asked if Trips hadn't started waking up. Discomfort aside, she'd have to thank that creature at some point if she was even allowed close to it. What would happen to it now, Krista didn't have the slightest idea about, and decided not to inquire about it. After the first couple hours, she felt a bit guilty, knowing her friends were out doing the grunt work of cleaning up the bodies of the fallen while she sat peacefully in this room. But the hours stretched on and she grew concerned. What was taking them so long? Had an emergency happened? Did they remember she was here? Was this a setup? Had the people who killed her mother decided it was time to finish her off? No, she'd already be dead by now, or somewhere further away at least. She bolted upright in her chair as the door opened and a man walked in. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. We've been very busy. I understand, Krista said as the man took a seat, looking him over. Wait, aren't you? Commander Erwin Smith of the Survey Corps, yes, Erwin confirmed as he took a seat. We have much to speak about, Cadet. She nodded, trying to hide her unease. Was this normal? She guessed the golden creature was important, but was her tale about being in its mouth really that crucial? About the beast, sir? In part, Erwin said idly. I take it that no one has attempted to inform you of the incident that happened just after your near-death. It was almost eerie how casually the commander brought up her near-fatal fall, but she supposed that was just part of being in the military. I don't believe so, sir. Why, what happened? Erwin's stare was intense, as if he was studying every inch of her face in an instant. She swallowed, wondering if he would even answer. When he did, it only made her more confused. We're calling it a Titan shifter. End of chapter. And there we go. This is mainly a continuation of last chapter, people starting reacting to the Trips as Eren thing. Armin is as observant as ever, Mikasa is Mikasa, and Hang continues to disturb everyone with her continuous compliments to Eren's new form. And the warriors are trying not to shit bricks. And now we get to Ymir's side of things, and I clarified why she's reluctant to talk to anyone. Obviously, due to the way she was revealed, she's getting worse treatment than even Eren. Can an Eren save Trost? Ymir tried to kill the thing that saved Trost. Hence, Krista gets dragged into this to apply pressure. We've entered the funny part of the FIC where the rest of the cast has to try and guess what Arendra is trying to say. Did not realize how funny this would be until I was reading it. P.S. to everyone still asking, yes, Eren will eventually get the wings, gravity beams, and everything else. So, you claim you have no prior knowledge of this creature or the existence of Titan shifters? Krista sighed, more from sheer exhaustion than actual annoyance. Or so she told herself as she sat at a table in a small, dark room with only an oil lamp for light. I'm sorry, but I'm still trying to process that one, she said slowly as she rubbed her forehead and looked across the table at the scout commander, Erwin Smith. You're saying that there was a soldier that turned into a Titan? How is that even possible? That is what we are attempting to discover, Erwin acknowledged neutrally, not giving away if he believed her ignorance or not. But why ask me? And why won't you let me see anyone? Krista asked in confusion. Because the Titan shifter revealed themselves immediately after you were saved by the beast, Erwin continued, leaning forward intently. You would appear to be of great importance to one or both of them. So it is a little hard to believe you know nothing of either. Krista paused for a moment as she realized something. I'm being detained. Until we're satisfied with our inquiry, yes, Erwin confirmed with a nod. But I don't know anything, Krista insisted helplessly. I mean, the beast was trying to save others too, so I'm not that surprised. But a Titan shifter? Why would I know anything about that? Because the shifter wasn't just a soldier, but a cadet of the 104th, Erwin elaborated. Krista's eyes widened at that. One of us was a Titan this whole time? She said in disbelief. Erwin said nothing, letting the silence speak for itself. Who? She questioned, the question leaving almost involuntarily. Are you sure you don't know the answer to that yourself? Erwin returned evenly. Krista's mind raced. Oh, who could it be? She wanted to say none of them, but if it had to be one of them, she had been eaten. Or that's what it had to look like, right? And when she was falling, there was one person racing forward to try and save her. Ymir. Erwin narrowed his eyes at the answer, no matter how soft it was given. Yes, it is Ymir. How did you know that? Wait. Just wait, Krista said slowly as she ran her hands through her hair, her mind spinning as her heart pounded in her small body. Ymir? Is she alive? Is she hurt? She is alive, but being contained elsewhere, Erwin explained stoically. What are you going to do with her? Krista asked cautiously, eyes turning alarmed before sharpening in fear. Did she hurt anyone? She asked, knowing that if she did, Ymir might have no hope at all of being seen as anything but an enemy. No human, no. But she attempted to kill the beast after it saved Trost, Erwin answered pointedly. The blonde girl suddenly stood up, hands slammed on the table. But she only did that because she thought I was eaten. That had to be it. Krista insisted. So, you're saying that this Ymir would value your life at the expense of humanity? Erwin inquired. Krista froze at that. I don't know. I don't know what she was thinking, Krista said, sliding back into her chair. You didn't answer my question. Even if we ignored her attempt at destroying the first hope for humanity against the Titans in 100 years, there is a more pressing matter, Erwin admitted sternly. Ymir's very existence implies that she might not be the only shifter, nor the only one to have infiltrated the walls. You think that she helped the colossal and armor Titans? That she's working with the ones that broke through Wall Maria? Krista asked slowly. She knew Ymir could be callous and not give a damn about most other people, but she couldn't reconcile the Ymir she knew assisting in something like that. But that was the question. Did she really know Ymir at all? She hasn't given us any reason to believe otherwise, Erwin answered. In fact, she's refused to cooperate with us at all. That idiot, Krista said, taking a deep breath. If she doesn't, then you'll? The military police will likely have her killed so that her remains can be studied, Erwin admitted without hesitation. Krista stilled, and Erwin watched rather intently as she raised her head. That was a very different look in her eyes and a shift in her very posture. I have no idea what's going on, Commander, she restated firmly. But I want to know. What are you suggesting? Erwin inquired. Let me see her. Let me see if I can get her to talk, Krista requested firmly. I know you might not believe me, but I want answers too. Erwin remained visually unfazed by her request, but he did appear to be considering it. And why should I believe that you yourself are not just an ally of hers, possibly another shifter as well? I don't know how to prove I'm human, Krista admitted before frowning. But I have something I can give you. I doubt you've had time to check, but there are no records of me existing before entering the military. Erwin raised a brow, showing his interest. I'm the bastard daughter of a noble. I was set up with a fake name and made to join the army so that I would disappear, Krista explained bluntly. Ymir knew that. She said she overheard it. And you think that was why she attempted to get close to you? Erwin questioned. I didn't think so at the time, but now, Krista said doubtfully. I thought I knew Ymir better than anyone. I still want to believe that. And if you do? Erwin asked pointedly. If, by chance, your only importance to her is your bond with her, what do you believe? Krista smiled. Erwin couldn't help noticing it seemed more genuine than the other ones he had seen from her. That Ymir is not an enemy of humanity. Erwin watched her as if searching for any doubt in her eyes before nodding slowly. For now I'll believe you. You will have your meeting with the shifter. If you agree to some terms. You want to use me to trick Ymir into talking, don't you? Krista predicted, almost expecting it. Is that an issue? Erwin countered. No, Krista said with a sigh. Because knowing Ymir, she's either being too stupid or stubborn to help herself right now. And flashback. Krista? She blinked away her memory, tilting her head as she heard the voice from the other side of the wall. Yes? She asked with a scrunched brow. Krista, I told you my secret, Ymir reminded softly. Mind sharing yours? Krista smiled, almost grinned really. Historia. My real name is Historia. Ymir gave a breath at that. Historia. Krista tried not to smile too wide and blushed too hard at how her true name sounded on Ymir's tongue. I'm not using it yet. Huh? Why not? Ymir asked, sounding a bit disappointed. I thought I'd wait until after this mess of yours clears up some before doing something like changing my name, Krista said with a snort. That's fair, Ymir conceded, her chains jingling as she shrugged. So, you believe me, right? Yes, Krista did. I want to, she said instead. But I know how it looks, Ymir admitted, swallowing thickly. Anytime an intelligent Titan shows up, it destroys something that helps humanity against the Titans. The walls, the cannons, and I took a bite out of the thing that saved Trost. So, I get it. I look suspicious at best, and this is not my best, she said with a half-hearted chuckle. And you won't say anything, Krista continued gently. Ymir, I understand everything except that. I mean, I get why you didn't come forward before. But you're already caught. Ymir didn't respond this time, clenching the sheets in her fists. They were still clearing out the bodies in Trost, Krista mused. Ymir clicked her tongue. Are you trying to guilt-trip me? What? No. Krista answered with a frown. No, I'm just wondering about the others. So many people died, and our friends are spending their days collecting the corpses. A small silence came over them as Ymir frowned in thought. Mikasa turned to tears yet? She asked, blunt yet without bite. I don't know. Armin looked like he was holding up, so I guess she is too, Krista answered with a sad smile. It's hard to believe, Eren died just before he could see the Titans finally pushed back. Ymir opened her mouth before closing it with a furrowed brow. Yeah, hard to believe. Krista raised an eyebrow at the tone. Ymir? Can you answer me one thing? Please? I'll try, Ymir promised, and it hurt Krista to hear her say it with such a pained tone. Why did you come here if you're not our enemy or ally? Krista inquired. Her question was met with emptiness. Ymir? Krista prompted. I'm thinking, Ymir answered distantly. I guess it's just as I said, I wanted to live my life for myself. Out there I couldn't really do that. I did in these walls for a while. As a thief in the interior? Krista asked as a jab, one she didn't realize she made. Oh, Historia has some bite to her, Ymir teased with a chuckle. But yeah, I didn't mind being a street urchin. It wasn't that different from Dash. Krista frowned as Ymir abruptly stopped her explanation. From what? Nothing, Ymir said neutrally but forcefully. Krista rolled her eyes. You're not very good at lying, Ymir. Lying is for pricks and surprises, Ymir countered good-naturedly. Well, you know what I think? Krista asked with a smirk. No. Ymir asked, curious by the tone. I don't think you were trying to avenge me or anything sweet like that, Krista said impishly. I think you were jealous. Jealous? What are you on about now? Ymir asked in confusion. That Trips knows what I taste like now. Dead silence rang in the cells, permeating the very air. That scaly motherfucker. Meanwhile, Eren's boredom grew and waned as Hang wrote down notes. He understood the importance of studying him, hence why he was standing next to a building, giving something for Hang to use as a reference to estimate his size and, occasionally, moving to give her a better look. So, he's about 20 meters tall, 25 if you stretch the necks up. Speaking of which, those beauties are 8.5, while the heads are about 2 meters tall. The body is a lot less slender than I'd expect at 6 meters, but that's probably to compensate for the 3 heads, Hang murmured to herself, looking up with a grin at her subject. She still couldn't help marveling at him as she stood on the ground, staring up at the golden beast. I'm coming in for a closer look, okay? Eren nodded with all 3 heads. Dre yawned, getting a look from Eins and Zwei. The left head looked apologetic until Eins yawned as well, glaring at his opposite head for starting this. Zwei just rolled his eyes while keeping his attention on the human approaching them. I need to figure out how that works one day, Hang mused as she approached, studying the legs and tails. Okay, these twins of yours must be 13 whole meters from the base. 2 tails but 3 heads? Maybe he'll grow another tail? Hang pondered before looking at the legs. You seem to always stand like this, so I'll just say the legs are in the 4.5 range. Eren pondered that point about his tails and heads. Why 3 heads? Why 2 tails? But then again, that might be asking why humans didn't have 3 or 4 eyes or only 1 set of arms. He missed arms though. Not even just human arms, he just missed having front limbs. It felt so weird not to have them, and his side heads ended up picking up his instincts to use his hands sometimes. Your claws all vary a bit, but I'd say around 3/5 of a meter is the longest, Hang continued on, glancing to his scales. Oi, I'd love to take a scale off, but we should probably be careful about that. Eren appreciated that. He was pretty sure that he'd cripple Hang if he accidentally flung her off his foot. Hang hummed while looking up, tapping her chin with her pencil. Like a titan, no genitals. But it might just be internal, seeing as you appear to be a reptile. I'll have to look into that more. She couldn't see it, but Eren's 3 heads had deadpanned. If they had the biological ability to blush, their faces would have turned orange from embarrassment. He was actually glad he didn't have a penis in this form, or a visible one at least, because then Hang would be sketching it, commenting on the size and girth, and he'd just want to smash all of his heads into the building and ignore everything. I wonder? While Hang continued her observations, Erwin was having a rather unusual meeting with Commander Pixis. My, you certainly do pop up a lot lately, Cadet Arlert, Pixis noted with a smile as the group of 4 met on the walls, soldiers from both corps nearby. Sir, Armin greeted himself and Mikasa saluting the commanders. At ease, Erwin said simply. The section commander has already told me of last night, but I would like you to confirm it once more. Armin nodded stiffly. The 3-headed creature is Eren Yeager of the 104th, believed to be Kia until last night. So our big friend isn't just a soldier but a young cadet fresh out of training, Pixis noted with interest, looking greatly amused. I'd share a drink with him, but I fear we'd run out of the good stuff before he was even buzzed. Erwin didn't acknowledge the joke, while their audience looked on awkwardly. Armin was obviously worried about this meeting's intent, while Mikasa had an impatient air about her. For now, only a handful of people were made aware of this discovery, besides those from last night. Until we understand more, it would be best to keep such information a secret to only those that need to know. Sir, wouldn't people be less wary of him if they know he's human? Mikasa questioned with a frown. Pixis hummed to himself. You'd have a point if not for the Titan Shifter, he commented casually. Erwin nodded in agreement. Word of the Titan Shifter has already spread beyond our ability to contain. If the people learned that this creature was originally a human as well, they wouldn't have reason to believe there is any difference between him and a Titan Shifter. Right? Armin said thoughtfully. We can see the differences between him and a Titan, but anyone just hearing or reading about him would just be imagining another giant monster, one on our side but still. Exactly, Erwin said. At the moment, we just don't know enough to convince the public of anything. The tales are now more or less of how a giant creature that hunts titans helped save Trost and defeated a titan that could masquerade as a human. Concerning but an overall hopeful tone. Mikasa nodded in understanding. May I ask why we are here, commanders? Erwin and Pixis shared a look before turning back to the cadets. We are currently forming an informal group to keep an eye on this creature, Erwin continued on. It was mainly to give the illusion that we have some control over the situation. However, to be frank, we don't know how much this has messed with the boy you used to know, Pixis simplified. And being around familiar faces that know who he is might make the situation a bit better for him. Armin blinked as he understood the meaning. They were trying to placate Eren. While his friend seemed to be himself, they had no way of knowing if this transformation hadn't affected his mind. Even if it hadn't, Eren was effectively confined to Trost with no way out and very little to do. It was almost funny. For right now, keeping Eren content was actually a military priority. Armin knew Eren wouldn't do anything to endanger those around him, not intentionally, but he decided not to voice these assurances and appear too biased. If it gave Mikasa and him an excuse to have access to Eren, he'd let the military worry for now. Our primary goal is to understand this situation as best as possible, Erwin continued. As the ones closest to him, do you believe you can interpret him to some degree? I believe so / absolutely, Armin and Mikasa both answered, Armin turning a bit sheepish at Mikasa's lack of hesitation. Both commanders noticed the differing answers but didn't comment on them. Due to keeping his identity a secret for now, we must ask that you address him by an alias when around others that are not in the know, Erwin explained. Some of our friends have taken to calling him Trips, Armin explained awkwardly, very sure that Eren wasn't too fond of that nickname. Will that suffice? That will do, Erwin answered, utterly unfazed by the nickname. Now dash. They were cut off by roaring coming from within Trost. 3 roars in sync to be specific. Eren? Mikasa said in alarm, racing to the edge to look down for the giant spot of gold, others doing so as well. The sight quickly became less alarming and more confusing. It was a bit hard to make out from the distance, but Eren clearly wasn't being attacked. Instead, his heads were roaring and growling down at something or someone. Well, I wonder what's got him all up in a fuss? Pixis mused idly. I believe I know, Erwin answered, turning to the cadets. Come with me. This is as good a time as any. Sir. They answered, all 3 of them descending off the wall. Pixis remained, deciding to make sure no one on the cannons got trigger happy. By the time they had reached the area, Eren was no longer roaring but was still growling. They landed to see that all 3 of Eren's heads were united in glaring down at a sheepishly grinning Hang, who waved at their arrival. Commander Erwin, fancy seeing you here, Hang said in false innocence. Hang, why is he growling at you? Erwin asked pointedly. Well, about that, and can you stop that for a second while I explain, please? I'm sorry, okay? Hang called over her shoulder at Eren. The giant creature complied, still glaring at Hang with, wait, Armin thought in confusion as he tried to read Eren's expression. It was hard, but it wasn't a raging kind of anger. Is Eren embarrassed? Thank you, Hang said before turning back to her leader, who watched her patiently yet expectantly. Anyway, I have good news. I have confirmed that he is almost definitely not a Titan. Erwin became interested, especially with Eren's reaction. All 3 heads stopped glaring to look at one another with questioning looks before turning back to Hang expectantly. And just how did you come to that conclusion? Erwin asked intently. Simple, he has an asshole. Dead silence rang over them for a moment. Excuse me? Mikasa asked pointedly, Erwin raising an eyebrow as if to prompt Hang further. Look, I know how that sounds. But a Titan doesn't have an anus. They just have butt cheeks. They don't digest what they eat, so they don't need one. Hang reminded, before gesturing to Eren with a confident grin. But he does. And if he does, that means that he has a digestive system. That his body doesn't function like a Titan's, but something else entirely. Armin's eyes went wide as he understood Hang's point. Eren's shape could be overlooked as just a very, very odd-looking abnormal Titan. But the more fundamental difference between him and the Titans made it easier to prove that Eren was in fact not a Titan at all. Still, that did leave one question. And how exactly did you discover this, Hang? Erwin asked. Hang grew silent, feeling the accusing stares of giant green eyes stabbing into her backside. Erwin looked up at Eren. I apologize for her, he said sincerely. I'll be sure to have her supervised better in the future. Eren let out 3 separate sighs. One of annoyance, another of understanding, and the last of gratitude. Come on, Erwin, you know this isn't the craziest thing I've done even this week. Hang defended. That is my concern, Hang, Erwin stated bluntly. Eren's left head nodded with wide eyes, as it was now his concern as well. On that note, where is Moblit? Erwin questioned with a frown. Oh, taking care of Sunny and Bean are sleeping. He was up all night helping me again, so I'm not sure anymore, Hang explained with a casual shrug. I see, Erwin acknowledged before turning to the cadets. I should assume you both accept helping watch over Trips? If Eren was surprised by the nickname's use, he only looked annoyed. Both of them nodded their confirmation. Very well. Hang, perhaps you should go check on the Titans, Erwin suggested. But I'm still not done with my dash, Hang started, only to see that the commander was glancing in the direction of the cadets. Oh, right. That's a good idea. Thank you, sir, Armin said in understanding, the 2 scouts leaving the trio to some privacy. There was an awkward moment when Mikasa and Armin just stared up at their giant, scaly friend. "Good morning, Eren," Mikasa said suddenly, smiling as if everything was normal. Armin decided that perhaps that was best. "Morning," he waved back. Eren's right head gave a nod with a grunting roar, returning the greeting as best he could. "Did you sleep well?" Mikasa asked, feeling some relief wash over her as the right and the middle head rolled their eyes at her concern. The left one, however, tilted his head back and forth, perhaps as a shrug or a so gesture. For Armin, it was easy enough to understand. It wasn't as bad as you might think. "That's good." "So?" Armin gave half-heartedly, glancing in the direction of the clogged breach. "You actually thought you could fill the hole with ripped-up buildings?" Eren gave him a flat look. "Yeah, I guess you didn't have a lot of options," Armin said, glancing to Eren's armless torso. Eren nodded meaningfully, repeatedly. "Yes, it is weird not having arms." "Should we be worried about getting him something to eat?" Mikasa asked with a frown. "He hasn't eaten anything since before the battle." Armin blinked at that very good point. Humanity did not have enough cattle to feed something this big. Eren gave out a call to grab their attention, all three heads shaking meaningfully before gesturing to his stomach and shaking again. "Is he saying he's not hungry?" Mikasa guessed, getting a rapid nod. Armin frowned, cupping his chin. "But if he has a digestive tract, shouldn't he have to eat something?" Armin murmured. The blond boy blinked as he felt hot air on his body. Looking up, he saw Eren was now closer to him, and the left head was right in front of him, with a rather blank look on his face. "Eren?" he asked, just a bit intimidated because, Eren or not, it was a giant head suddenly right in front of him. "Armin," Mikasa said, nodding to the side and drawing his attention to Eren's tail, which moved about before it started to rattle for a moment. Armin stared for a moment, and then turned sheepish as he looked back towards Eren, noting the right head was giving him a grin, while the middle just watched on. "Yeah, pissing you off probably wasn't the sanest plan either, but it worked, right?" Armin reminded with a weak chuckle. The other two heads nodded, but the left one gave him a disapproving look still. "Besides, I trusted you," Armin assured with a smile, getting skeptical glances all around. "Well, yeah, even before I knew it was you. You were letting Titans eat you while you pushed the boulder. It was pretty obvious you wanted to help at that point." All three heads gained amused looks, chortling out roars that must have been laughter. Mikasa smiled, enjoying the peaceful moment they were having, which ended as Eren suddenly went silent. They looked up in concern, Eren standing back at his normal height again, but all three heads gained expressions that appeared to be of deep thought and consideration before abruptly turning around. "Eren?" Mikasa said in surprise. He looked back at them, nodding for them to follow him. She shared a look with Armin before they followed him, taking to the roofs to run along them. Eren wasn't going at a very fast pace, but it still required effort for those of human size to keep up with him. "What's gotten into him?" "I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to walk." Armin mused, looking to Eren's heads. No, he was looking too keenly around to just be taking a stroll. "What's he searching for?" They used their gear to get over a crashed-in gap in the roof, almost on instinct, but Mikasa's brow furrowed as she glanced around. "Armin, this path? Isn't it?" Mikasa pointed out. "Yeah, you're right. This is the path Eren took to move the boulder," Armin confirmed, eyeing the spot where he had yelled at Eren to get him angry enough to stun the Titans. Eren suddenly stopped. It was impossible not to notice, the sudden silence and stillness bringing them to a halt as well. The three-headed dragon was now peering up and down the road before him. Mikasa and Armin moved to the edge, looking down for whatever might be there. It quickly became obvious what was different about this area. There were plenty of normal signs of battle. Damages to the buildings and roads from Titan attacks, the smears of blood from the fallen, and the occasional discarded piece of their blades. But there were also large smears of a black substance on the ground. "This is where the Titans were biting him before we could arrive," Mikasa realized with a tinge of regret. But neither male noticed this, their attention on something else. "He definitely isn't a Titan." Mikasa looked to Armin in confusion, who was staring down with stunned eyes, his brain working a million miles a minute. "Titans vanish, even their blood." "His didn't," Armin stated. "He wanted to show us this?" "No," Mikasa said suddenly, watching as Eren leaned down to examine the area. "He's still looking for something." Armin furrowed his brow as he recalled what he said himself before Eren started acting like this. "Is he looking for his flesh?" It was a strange thing to say even if they knew Eren was fine. Or as fine as he could be in this form. The garrison probably already rounded it up, Mikasa mused. But that would still be proof, right? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There's no mistaking flesh that large for a hum dash. Armin stopped as Eren gave a call, coaxing them to use their ODM gear to descend down to the street, careful to avoid Eren's necks. His heads were all looking at a smear of his own black blood, the middle head glancing to them as they approached. Mikasa's eyes caught something in the dark blood, something shining. Is this? She said, moving forward to pick it up. It was bigger than her hand and it was smeared in the blackness. But Mikasa turned it over to reveal a clean spot, shining like gold. One of his scales, Armin realized. The others must have missed it with all the blood. We've barely ever planned for what to do with a territory reclaimed by Titans, let alone with something as big as them that doesn't just vanish. Zwei gave a hum-like growl from behind them, causing Armin to look to Mikasa curiously, who shook her head. She couldn't guess what Eren was thinking right now either. Armin found that the middle head was the hardest to read. They were eventually going to have to talk with Eren, try to get whatever answers they could get from him in this form. What do you think the garrison did with these pieces? Mikasa asked idly. Ainz made a strange hissing noise. They probably burned most of it, Armin answered, the same head nodding to indicate that was his idea too. Meanwhile, what do you mean you burned them? Hannes flinched under the glare of the rather crazed-looking female scout. Look, ma'am, I was just following directions. And the higher-ups already set aside some for studying, he explained, attempting to be diplomatic. Do you idiots have any idea how important those pieces of flesh are? They might be our only way of understanding our beautiful new ally. Hang declared, looking like she might bite him. Hannes decided to ignore the beautiful part in that sentence and hoped that was just his tiredness playing tricks on him. Well, it's a good thing it's all still here, right? He pointed out. Hang started to say something before closing her mouth, gaining a curious look. What do you mean? You didn't start burning yet? Oh no, we started all right, Hannes answered, waving her over to a table, where 3 rather large slabs of strange meat sat, with yellow scales still on them. We had those things on a pyre all night, but they didn't burn one bit. Hang just started at the flesh, her entire demeanor changing. Ma'am? Hannes prompted, causing her to step towards the chunks of flesh intently. The remains don't dissolve, the flesh regenerates in a completely different form and it doesn't burn, Hang mused. 2 of those things are proof it's not of the same kind of creature as the Titans, but this? Hang stopped short and started smelling the air. Do you smell that? Huh. Hannes said, taking a few whiffs of his own. I don't smell anything. Exactly, Hang stated with wide eyes. This flesh has been dead for nearly 2 days now. It should reek. Hannes frowned. He hadn't thought about it, having had his mouth and nose covered when handling the main stash of this, but she had a point. What should we do then? Bury it. We might have to in the end. For right now, I have some research to do, Hang said, turning to the soldier. Don't let anyone touch this. I'll be back soon. Ma'am, Hannes called after, causing her to pause. That thing in there? It's on our side, right? Oh? Hang asked, looking over her shoulder at him curiously. You just seemed rather spooked, I guess, Hannes stated warily. Hang slowly gained a rather disturbing grin on her face. Oh, it's not that. I'm actually about to burst in excitement, and it's taking every ounce of will to control myself. But don't you worry, that gorgeous lug is definitely with us. With that, she left. So I didn't imagine her saying that, Hannes said, rubbing the back of his head. Where the hell are those brats in this mess anyway? End of chapter. Well, there you go. Hope you all enjoy this. Especially with how Hang confirmed that Eren isn't a Titan. But other than that, we got Hannes showing up in the deep ending mystery for everyone as Eren proves to more and more, not a Titan by his very nature. Meanwhile, Krista is fishing for whatever info she can get out of Ymir. That's about it for this chapter. Not a lot happened, but things are being set in place. Anyway, until next time. Hope you all are safe. Anything. Levi stood at the entrance to the underground cells, looking over at the approaching form of Erwin Smith. Well, she got her talking. Mostly mushy shit, but the kid's not bad. The Titan brat hasn't revealed anything important though. We weren't expecting results right away, Erwin acknowledged in acceptance. So, what was that screeching about earlier? Did Hang poke the thing in the ass? Levi asked neutrally. Erwin remained utterly silent. Lev's eyes widened minutely. Please tell me you're joking. Hang is accustomed to Titans which don't seem capable of being embarrassed, Erwin reminded, a small quirk of the lips betraying his amusement. Right? Levi said, deciding not to address that statement. He also decided to make sure Hang took a bath within 24 hours, even if he had to throw her in a river. That aside, how is our golden friend? Erwin hummed. Levi had already been brought up to speed on the fact that Trips was in fact a cadet, just as the shifter had been, but seemed unable to change back. Well enough, I suppose. We can do very little to accommodate him besides surrounding him with familiar faces, Erwin explained. Hang plans on making some attempts to form whatever dialogue we can with the creature, for answers and mutual understanding. Levi knew that would be hard with the scaly brat unable to speak, but he figured Hang would have an idea or two eventually. Any word from the higher-ups? Erwin frowned. The creature can't be moved, obviously, and transporting the shifter would be a risk with her intentions so uncertain. Levi raised an eyebrow as he understood. They're coming here. Erwin nodded in confirmation. There will be several officials coming to see the situation for themselves. It is, for all intents and purposes, a trial. More for the shifter than for Trips, but still, he explained grimly. They'll arrive in 3 days. So, we have 3 days to decide if the mouthy brat is a lost cause, and to make Gold seem as human-friendly as possible, Levi summarized cynically. That would be the long and short of it, Erwin agreed. You'll be present, obviously, as a safe dash. Captain Levi, Commander Erwin. Both turned to see Hang approaching them with a rather strange smile on her face. Erwin felt a sense of caution grow within him. Hang never called Levi by rank unless it was an introduction. For her to use it, something must be wrong. Hang, something to report? He asked, Levi watching intently. No, everything is fine. Peachy. Great. I just need a word with you in private about the soldiers mishandling my Titan babies, Hang answered, keeping her false smile up. Now Erwin was growing very concerned, but outwardly just nodded as he led Hang away. Levi frowned as they left. For Hang to be acting like that, she must think that whatever she had to say could not have any chance of being overheard. Hang remained eerily quiet as Erwin led her away to a more secluded spot, entering a currently vacant home for good measure. Okay, Hang. What is bothering you? I just discovered something that might be dangerous, Hang started delicately. I was studying the remains from, what did the cadets call him? Oh right, Trips. I'm aware that the tissue didn't vanish like a Titan's, Hang. And I already assumed it was resistant to flames, Erwin stated, having a hunch she would bring this up eventually. You did? Hang asked in surprise. I saw the remains being stored away in an alley. They would have burned through half of it by then if they could, Erwin answered. Okay, point, but that's not it, Hang continued, pulling something out of her jacket. I pulled this off to study it. Erwin looked at it, a large gilded scale that could only come from one entity. One of his scales. What of it? Well, I got to wondering, why does his scale look like it's made of gold? Hang continued in false whimsy. And the answer is, it doesn't. Erwin raised an eyebrow, silently inquiring an explanation. Erwin, it doesn't look like gold, it is gold, Hang explained in a forceful whisper. Erwin's eyes narrowed as his mind kicked in. Eren didn't regenerate like a Titan, but he did regenerate all the same. And if he could transform like the shifter, that was a potential near-endless supply of gold. People might not only try to take bits of flesh Eren had lost in battle, but try to rip them off Eren himself at their own risk. And the nobles, in their greed, might try to force Eren into being a gold factory for them to harvest. That was even ignoring the effect it would have on the economy. But there was one problem Erwin had with this on a logical level. Gold isn't that strong of a metal, Erwin reminded with a frown. How can those scales resist so much punishment? It's not just gold, obviously, Hang answered with a frown as she looked back down at the scale. There is something else in there as well. Another element, or maybe the scales below the golden layer are harder than the coating. I don't know anything for sure yet. I just thought you should know before someone else figures this out. Erwin nodded. Thank you, Hang. Anything else to report? Nothing so secretive, Hang said in relief. I've been trying to understand why the flesh doesn't decay. It took me a while to find one, but I found a piece of flesh that was smaller than all the rest. Unlike the other chunk, it was starting to decompose. Really? Why would that be? Erwin inquired. It's hard to say anything for sure, Hang admitted. I think the size had something to do with it, but I asked and found out it was part of the batch they did not try to burn. Erwin furrowed his great brows at what Hang was implying. You think the fire might have actually rejuvenated the flesh some? I'm not thinking anything yet. It could be a coincidence, a random fact that ultimately had no effect on this at all. It's just so exciting discovering a whole new kind of creature in a similar classification as the Titans, Hang said, grinning madly before frowning in thought. Commander, you know people better than I do most of the time. Do you think this will be enough to convince everyone that he isn't a Titan? Erwin paused in consideration before nodding. At this point, yes, if presented correctly. He saved Trost too, and every soldier from that battle speaks of Trips like a savior or an ally. The atmosphere is in his favor, Erwin acknowledged. But there is still the most important question. Aang nodded. Later. How did this happen? Eren cocked his heads at the figures standing on the roof. Erwin, Aang, Levi, Mikasa, and Armin. How did you become like this? Erwin clarified. I'm aware that you can't speak. But if you could you answer? Eren just shook his head now, answering no to the question. No, you don't know or just don't want to say? Levi asked pointedly. Ainz snorted while Dre frowned. Scowled? Zwei quirked his head thoughtfully before one tail rose up. Oh, he means the first one. Aang realized, pointing overly excitedly. The heads nodded while Eren's friends watched on. Armin knew they needed to ask this for clarification, but he couldn't help noticing it was just the 5 of them with Eren. None of the other cadets were present. He wondered why. Do you recall turning into this form at all? Erwin continued on. Eren gained 3 looks of deep thought, his tails refusing to rise. He doesn't know? Mikasa asked, more to herself than the others. Probably had a lot of other things to worry about, Levi remarked, glancing to the boulder that sealed the breach of Trost. Eren turned away from them to Hank's alarm. Hey, where are you? She stopped as Erwin held out an arm to stop her. Eren didn't walk away from them so much as just wandered to the side. How had he become this? He remembered Thomas dying, everyone dying. His eyes wandered down to his right leg, remembering his human one being bitten off. He's trying to remember, Armin said softly, getting curious looks from all but Erwin. Eren's eyes trailed to Armin for a moment and the boy winced. Eren remembered saving Armin from the bearded Titan. He remembered? Is he growling? Levi asked with a frown. No, Mikasa answered, watching the trembling in Eren's long necks. He's groaning. He remembered being eaten. Being in the belly of a Titan, among dozens of other victims. He remembered some delirious Sodder crying for her mother or father as she died. Fear, despair, rage. Hey, wow. Aang exclaimed, nearly falling backward as Eren slammed his head into a building. Eren. Mikasa called out in alarm. Keep your voice down. Call him Trips or something if you got to yell. Levi scolded in annoyance. But what's wrong with him? Mikasa asked, torn between glaring at the soldier and rushing towards Eren. He's remembering being eaten alive, Erwin stated simply. I imagine we would all rather not remember surviving such an ordeal. Levi suppressed a shudder as he silently agreed. Eren simmered, gritting his teeth as his face remained buried in the wood and debris. He remembered being devoured, but how did he get out? How did he turn to this? His mind swam between the gap, the time between being about to die and slaughtering Titans with this form. All he could find was a jolt, a spark of some sensation that ran through him. It was familiar now that he remembered it, but where had he felt it before? He pulled himself free of the building, shaking the bits of wood off before returning to his audience. With a short pause, he shook his head with a regretful look on his face. So, he doesn't know either, Levi summarized. The left head let out a low crooning sound. He's apologizing, I think. For doing. Armin paused, looking over the hole Eren had put in the roof. It's fine. I can only imagine how stressful and confusing this has been for you, Erwin accepted, still staring Eren in the eye, or at least the middle one mostly. It was strange for Eren. Mikasa and Armin knew him, human or not. Aang treated him like a great discovery, while Levi was eyeing his every movement. But when Erwin spoke, it was like the commander was really speaking to another human rather than just pretending Eren wasn't some giant beast. And Eren appreciated it on some level. Ainz, Zwei, and Dre. I understand that you have the ability to stun Titans with your roar, Erwin stated after a moment. Were you aware of that before Cadet Arlert, shall we say, motivated you? Eren nodded in confirmation. Then is there a reason why you did not use it more liberally? Erwin asked pointedly. Eren's middle head nodded while his right gave out a large yawn. Oi, brat, take this seriously, Levi said in warning, getting a glare from the same head, who deliberately yawned again. Is he trying to be cheeky? Sir? I think that's his answer, Armin stated, getting everyone's attention. I think whatever he does to stun the Titans takes more energy out of him. Ah, Levi said in understanding, knowing the right head was still eyeing him. The middle head nodded before gesturing to the left head, who rolled his head back and forth. And I'm going to assume that means you didn't know exactly how to use that ability at the time, Erwin guessed. This time the heads looked relieved at his understanding as one of the tails deliberately pointed in Erwin's direction. Do you think you could do so again? Eren nodded firmly now, showing the confidence that he had. We could use the Titans for him to test on, Levi pointed out. Don't offer up my new baby so freely. Hang protested with a glare to her comrade, everyone dutifully ignoring her outburst as best they could. I'm not sure if your friends have informed you, Erwin stated, nodding to Armin and Mikasa. But they and the others that know your identity already will be part of the main group of those organized to keep tabs on you. Eren didn't look offended in the slightest, and they took that as a good thing. Ally or not, they couldn't leave him completely alone. We'll be calling you Trips for the time being, Hang informed with a smile. Now Eren looked firmly annoyed with the return of the nickname Connie and Sasha had given him. Erwin became slightly amused by the reaction. Please bear with it for now. We need to make clear to everyone that you are not just a rogue titan with an odd form, he requested. The giant creature gave its accepting affirmation to the request. I don't think we'll get much more progress right now, Erwin stated idly. For now, try to get comfortable while things settle. Hopefully we can find a way to make communication easier. Eren hoped so, he genuinely did. Meanwhile, Levi didn't dwell much on the meeting with the Golden Brat. He'd let Hang and Erwin figure out how to handle that situation. The Titan Brat was his main priority right now. He returned to the entrance, finding ELD and Aluo standing outside. Captain, ELD greeted. Anything to report? He asked neutrally. If there is, Petra and Gunther would be the ones to ask. That's a good sign, I suppose, Aluo stated idly. Levi hummed, heading down the stairs before stopping at the bottom. He could see Gunther seated in the chair across from the cells, Petra leaning against the wall. She must have caught sight of him as she started walking towards him. He raised an eyebrow at her, inquiring if anything had happened. Petra just giggled quietly. They're cute together. Levi rolled his eyes before walking past her. Sir, Gunther greeted. Ah, great, Shrimpy is back, Ymir said sardonically. Hey, I'm shorter than he is. Krista protested from the other cell. He's scrawny, you are fun-sized, Ymir countered with a smirk. Well, we're about to deprive you of your fun for now, Levi said, taking the keys from Gunther, heading to Krista's cell. Hey, the hell are you doing to her? Ymir demanded, trying to sound more angry than scared. I'm going to give her a black eye, maybe knock some teeth out, Levi answered dryly. Krista swallowed nervously. She was mostly sure the captain wasn't serious, but he was very intimidating. Ymir growled in her throat. You cockbiter, I'll dash. Relax, Levi said bluntly. We're just taking her to take a bath. Unlike you, she doesn't have to wallow in her own stench, just yours. Ymir simmered as she heard Levi removing the chains from Krista before leading her out in cuffs. I'll take over for you both when she's done. Ymir listened as their footsteps vanished, a dark and creeping horror filling her gut. Hey, you with the carrot top, Ymir called, catching Petra by surprise. Be straight with me. Your captain won't do anything with Krista, right? It took a moment for the meaning to register, Gunther going still in shock while Petra briefly gained an angry look before smiling. It was not a nice smile. Ymir, was it? Petra asked with a sickly sweet voice. What exactly are you accusing my captain of right now? I'm asking if he keeps it in his damn paw dash. Ymir stopped as Petra suddenly drew her blades, gaining a faux bored expression. You know, Hang is very curious to find out if you can heal even in human form and how much, Petra mused. Should we start with the tongue, Ymir? The shifter girl wisely didn't answer but felt relieved a bit. If the scout was that offended, Krista was probably safe in one way at least. Meanwhile, Krista stretched her back and now unshackled arms as she walked freely. Pretending to be restrained is almost worse than being restrained, Krista mused, mostly to herself. Levi ignored her comment. So, did you learn anything new or just spend the entire time whispering sweet shit to one another? I think I did both, sir, Krista answered honestly. She still doesn't want to talk though. What else is new? Levi retorted evenly. She knows about other shifters, Krista stated bluntly. Levi paused, considering that. What did she say? I pointed out that Trips and her can definitely take on the armor titan, so that just meant worrying about the colossal titan. She laughed. She didn't mean to, she tried to cover it up, but I heard it, Krista answered with a frown. It's that laugh people give someone when they think they've seen the worst of it. I've heard her laugh like that a few times. Levi nodded. So, shifters or not, she knows about other threats to us. Have you got a sense of why she doesn't want to speak? She's scared of something. Something about helping us, Krista continued. I kept prodding her a bit on it, but... I get it. Anything else? Levi pressed on. Because we only have a few days for her to make up her mind. Krista almost asked what would happen in a few days, but decided she didn't want to know. She'd just have to make sure Emer talked. Nothing you'd want to hear, sir. Where are you taking me anyway? To take a bath. I was serious, you don't get to stink up the place any more than it has to be, Levi stated bluntly. Okay. Krista accepted awkwardly. Sir, may I ask an unprofessional question? Might as well, Levi accepted in resignation. What's a good comeback from a short person to a tall person? Krista asked curiously. Levi stopped, looking back at her with a considering look. Maybe he'd enjoy this just a little. I assume you don't mean cutting them off at the knees. Time seemed to pass in a blur for everyone. Krista continued to play the part of hostage while trying to coax Emer to willingly cooperate with the scouts, while Eren attempted to stave off his boredom with the help of his friends. One group was having more progress than the other. Really, asshole? Jean asked with a glare, looking from the horse saddle on the ground to the giant reptile that he swore was smirking at him with 3 heads. Really? Hey, you told him to prove it was him again just to make sure it wasn't a dream, Connie reminded with a snicker. I didn't expect him to throw a damn saddle at me. Jean countered, getting a disturbing croaking sound from Eren that he knew was a laugh. Shut it. And was putting a damn horse saddle in your mouth really worth the joke? Eren nodded without hesitation, thrice over, getting several laughs from all around. Haha, he's got you there, Jean? Reiner said with a laugh, Annie standing silently by him. Well, you seem to have adjusted to this pretty well, Jean, Marco complimented. Hard to take him seriously when I know it's that blockhead, Jean said, getting a mock snarl from Eitz. I don't need a translation for that. Okay, Armin interrupted, looking over the group. For the sake of appearances, we're all meeting like this as an introduction to trips. And we all have to call him that for now. Even Mikasa? Annie asked skeptically. Don't you mean especially? Sasha countered knowingly. Yes, Armin said with a sigh. Anyway, the plan is to rotate watching him in groups of 2 every 3 hours. So Connie and Sasha, you and Mikasa, Reiner and me, Jean and Marco, Annie summarized. Well, the groups aren't set in stone or anything, Armin said, scratching his head sheepishly. So, any questions? Sasha raised her hand instantly. Yes, Sasha? Armin answered, feeling both wary and awkward. Question, can we ride him? Sasha asked hopefully. Eitz flared his nostrils, glaring at the food-loving girl. I take that as a no, Marco decided with a weak smile. More like a hell no if you ask me, Connie murmured, disappointed but somewhat expected that reaction. But why not? Mikasa gets to, Sasha pointed out, jabbing her finger in the direction of the Ackerman, who was currently sitting on the back of Dre's neck, near the base, and looking particularly content with her own arrangements. Now Dre glared, leaning in very close to snort a gust of hot air into Sasha while the others leaned away. In summary, because the jackass says so, Jean said, looking up at where Mikasa sat, looking far more comfortable than she had any right to be on that scaly exterior. Lucky jackass, Jean muttered enviously. Question. What are we supposed to do besides watch him? Annie asked with a raised eyebrow. Or is this just for appearances? Kind of. Armin answered with a shrug. But it helps to have us around and make sure the other soldiers don't accidentally get hurt around him or do anything, well, stupid. And what about when he does something stupid? Connie asked. 'Cause no offense man, but you've had stupid moments that make Sasha look like Armin. Haha W. Dre grunted in response to that. Mikasa smiled as she called down from her spot. He says thank you, Sasha. Annie silently watched on as the group chatted, with Eren's own strange input. Eren still slept at night in this form, so if she and Reiner were given a night shift, that could give them a window where they might be able to sneak about with little suspicion. They had already lied and claimed that they hadn't told Bertolt yet, as it was undecided if he would be brought into this group. The question was figuring out where Emer was being held. They hadn't planned on this being a dragged-out affair, just taking down Wall Rose like they did Maria, hence why they hadn't done much of any recon on Trost. But Annie was reasonably sure Emer was hidden in the area on the other side of the wall. Trost was growing more and more vacant as the body collecting went underway. But there was too much foot traffic on the other side, wandering into any place they weren't meant to be could be seen as suspicious if they were noticed. Annie wondered what they were looking for if they were looking at all. If Emer hadn't said anything yet, What would the military look for as potential enemy agents? For right now, she was sure that anyone in their age group was suspicious. Given that Ymir and Eren were both from the 104th, she imagined that those that knew who the scaled beast really was now were scrutinizing all of them. Her eyes narrowed, wondering a distinct possibility. Were they placing them around Eren as a blanket countermeasure? If they suspected any of them being a Titan, then they placed many of them near a Titan killer. And if they somehow figured out who was a shifter, then they'd just have to tell Eren and... Eren's middle head snapped his jaw loudly at Mikasa, who refused to get down from sitting on his neck. A very precarious situation they were all in, and it all came down to if their comrades realized they weren't really their allies, and if they did, would they be able to pretend they didn't know long enough to set up a trap? One wrong move on their own part would give them away, too hasty a move from their enemies would alert them to their cover being blown. She absently stared at the golden figure Eren had become. Of all people, why did it have to be him? Out of everyone they knew in the walls, even just in the 104th, Eren was probably the worst person to have this kind of power. He not only had the will and desire to use it against his enemies, but he knew them. Not just in the sense of friends, they had fought with him, trained alongside him, and even taught him. How easy would it be for Eren to recognize their fighting styles during a fight against their titans? However long his disbelief lasted, she imagined. Then would come the rage and the real fight. Still, on the upside, this would also give her and Reiner chances to observe Eren for potential weaknesses, and possibly learn new details from the scouts. End of chapter. Well, here's the next chapter. And yes, Ghidorah's scales actually have gold in them according to the Monsterverse. A bit of a slow chapter, but it's kinda supposed to be. No one is making much progress with Ymir or Eren, so it's slow in Universe 2. Still, yeah, in canon the trial happened in He Capital, but that was because they moved Eren there while he was in a coma after Trost. They can't move Eren, and Ymir is awake with no clear allegiance to the people of the walls, and they know next to nothing on shifter limitation. Thus, any trial that happens has to happen in Trost itself. I mean, yeah, they could have the trial without Ymir or Eren present, but that's not as fun and has its own problems. Also, Mikasa is riding a dragon, which is just awesome to imagine. That dragon is also Eren, which just probably fulfills a few of Mikasa's dreams. Oh, sorry, had to. See you next time. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share, and donate for more videos.